Hello everybody, and welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, episode number 28. I am your host, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi, go by MaskedSwan on the internet, and of course, I'm joined by my first co-host, that being the vivacious man himself, Samuel Initia1ise. Good, sir, welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
And over on the complete opposite side of where I am if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, but if you've got it in your ears, you won't know any of that. And I have the dazzling man himself. Tarek would blush at how shiny and spotless. I fucked this up. Alex, otherwise known as Nymaera.
The shiny and chrome.
Yeah. Welcome to the show as well, Alex.
Lovely to be here. I don't quite have like the low neck line for that. That's
Armor of the Fifth Age Nymaera is a cosplay reward for the Patreon we'll be setting up at some point.
Episode 100. Ooh. Wait, no, I'm not. No. I said there was a cosplay. I'm not saying it's that one.
Yeah, no. Don't lock yourself into any of those yet.
No, one.
But gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
I'm not nearly buff enough for that.
This is the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, and well, Initia1ise. What is this podcast?
This podcast is for all of those people wanting to know about the LJL, the Japanese Pro League of Legends League, was inelegantly said. But either way, there is not a lot of content out there for that particular league in English, so we're kind of doing it, and it's been a lot of fun. So come and grab your extra knowledge about the LJL right here, right now.
Okay, well I feel more knowledgeable now, but I'm still a bit confused on who we even are and our affiliation with Riot Games. So Nymaera, could you potentially fill me in and our listeners?
If I were to tell it in the form of the story, it'd be very much like The Lord of the Rings. And we already talked about, the Fifth Age, the armor of the Fifth Age territory. But this is more like the Third Age, the war against Sauron and the war against no content in English for the LJL. And it was a great collaboration of people. And, you've got the men of the West, you've got the elves, the dwarves, and maybe each of us are representatives of one of those. But Riot is not in the fellowship of the LJL Officially Unofficial. Okay. We are completely on it on our own. We are three plucky adventurers heading towards our end goal, which is English content for that LJL. We're in it alone, lads.
Yeah. Gondor calls for aid, and Riot did not answer. What can we say?
Well, we've not explicitly gone to them yet.
We haven't lit the beacons just yet.
These are like the beacons. We've made a mistake.
Crap. Where's Pippin?
Oh god, oh no, let's go back. This podcast is a representation of our own views and opinions. This does not represent the LJL Officially Unofficial Cast. This is purely name coincidence. Potentially we'll go through some rebranding in the future. Maybe we'll never get to episode 100 because we'll just keep having new seasons and then it's just a scam. We're just scammazing you the whole way, but regardless, you can find all of our social medias either below us, so at MaskedSwan, at Initia1ise with a 1, and at Nymaera, as well as you can find us in the description or the podcast notes for all of that, including the LJL Officially Unofficial social media streams. And you can also check out this podcast, as I hinted towards earlier, on all major audio podcast platforms. And it goes from Spotify, Dazza, and all those others. And if there's anything out there that we haven't got it on, let us know. We'd probably be interested in doing it.
But not SoundCloud.
Nah, fuck SoundCloud. They make me pay for that shit. Nah. Unless you want to sponsor.
It's been a while since we
not
mentioned
sound.
that.
It's not sound. It's very much not sound.
Not sound.
Not SoundCloud.
Right, well, gentlemen, this podcast we're going to be recapping week 7 and the end of the summer split for the LJL. We've now covered 2 full splits, gentlemen. We did it.
We're pretty great.
I was hoping that someone would have like a.
I just want to take a moment here to thank my family.
Yeah, everything's really
my
cool.
Friends and my family. I wouldn't be able to do this without them. And
one of your families in this podcast.
Yeah, Sam. What the heck, dude?
So we'll be
disowned.
We'll be recapping the final standings and each of the narratives there, and also just kind of talking about each of the teams and around that. We won't be going into our full in-depth of how our teams got here and everything. That will be our next podcast, as well as probably some other stuff happening in the next podcast, as we will be having a week break from the LJL. No games this week coming. Next week will be all of that. So we'll do our standard. We'll also be talking about the tiebreaker match that will be happening tonight of us recording this podcast. Me and Initia1ise will be covering that live over on the game. We'll be talking about our predictions and just kind of the matchup. It is a best of one game, and it's only really sorting out who gets to be that 4th seed and who is going to be 5th place. So a lot to play for, relatively speaking. But still something we'll talk about here. Obviously, you'll be listening to this on Thursday at earlier, so it will be a little bit of a blast from the past, so you can tell us if we were right or wrong with our predictions. Then we'll have our players of the week as standard, and then questions. So, gentlemen, it's about time that we get into our main meat and potatoes, as I love to go by, as we are the potatoes. And gentlemen, our final standings. We know who's making playoffs. We already knew that last week, though, but now we know the seeding and everything else around that. We go bottom up, as always, because we want to kind of praise those that made jumps and be a little bit disappointed in others. And I think disappointed is kind of where we have to sit with our first team at the very bottom. I don't even know what their loss streak is at this point. I think it's 0-8 at this point in their loss streak. But that is Rascal Jesters. They had another 0-2 week and
7 losses.
7 losses. Okay, close. Rest in peace, Rascal Jester. Right?
That's half a split, dude. That's half a split. Wow.
Well, they didn't beat Axis though.
Congrats.
But not this week.
What happened to the Jesters, lads? This was their last week, and is it just same old in your opinions? I mean, they lost to Axis this week and Destination Focus Me. Their Destination Focus Me loss was pretty lopsided, and this was also not their substitutes necessarily doing that. That was just Cog and Hatchamecha having a pretty meh game, and then they just got decimated really by Axis in a more controlled environment, because it did take a little bit longer.
The Axis one was much more competitive early. I'll give them that. Pink got out to a 3-0 lead on the Katarina. That's Katarina one trick.
What did that
That's
turn
all
into,
good news,
though?
Well, it turned into a 4-6 Katarina, and Jesters again just I don't know, had very limited win conditions. Were always in odd spaces with their drafts because of what their players could actually play and wanted to play. That was not an easy comp to play Katarina into either. You're playing into Galio in particular, who just makes your life miserable. Hextech Ultimatum comes down, and you can't escape from that either, from the Camille, from Uinyan. You know, lots of things to make Pink's life miserable. So you're playing 4v5 at that point in team fights because Katarina's... Lots of things go wrong, basically, is the long and short of it. But Jesters playing with two subs who weren't really LJL ready, showed for 7 games in a row. Frankly.
And they've always been at the bottom. They've played from basically bottom 2 spots for most of this split. So, RIP, you've had 2 subs. Let's get off them, because I don't think it's worth chatting too much more about them. Go on then, Nymaera, go on.
Art is in elo hell. Art is in such elo hell.
Sure, yeah, I'd agree with that one.
That's the one thing I'll say about this team. He's the one guy that's consistently tried to do something. His Caitlyn has been really good. He's been picking up before the other AD carries in the region. I thought that was something which Rascal Jesters might be able to pull out something special with, but they're not at the level of the other teams, whether it be in draft because of their champion pools, as Sam was saying, or the multitude of other reasons that you guys have brought up as well. I do think that Cog has been okay for most of the split.
Same with Hatch.
This week was bad. Yeah. This week was bad, guys. 0-9 versus DFM for Cog and 1-7 for Hatchamecha. Admittedly against a very strong topside team, but oh gosh, that is not a way to go out. So a lot of pride lost from Rascal Jester, particularly because they lost to another team very close to them.
And in all honesty, while it was slightly competitive, I remember us covering this match, and it was like, okay, it's competitive, but at the same time, I was like, I still always felt Axis were gonna win the game, even when Pink got 3-0.
Bloody Vakarthus was up 50 CS at like 10 minutes. Like, it was one of those games where you're like, oh no.
And Pink was on a champion.
Oh no.
You can't carry on Katarina versus this team. You can't. I'm sorry. No. He tried.
No, probably not.
Axis gave him one good team fight at the early game, and then that was it. Anyway, let's actually talk about Axis, because they were the team that actually got a little pride. They lost they did lose one of their games this week, sadly, and that was to the Hawks. But they had a nice showing versus Rascal Jesters, and you know what? It's sad that it took them this long to really power up and level up, but I'm not sure how much of a deeper run they would have been able to do, as they did also lose to the Hawks, you know, so pride restored a little bit, but yeah, still unsure, personally.
Rough one.
Yeah, we said a lot about the Axis team over all of our podcasts, because we, you know, being a playoff team, that's the Cinderella team from spring. No, we love those guys. We love the team. They've got such a good story behind them, but stories aren't reality. And turns out esports is not an anime, as Monte Cristo so often says. Yeah, it sucks. At least they beat the Jesters. They beat them in style. But they will still be. The good thing is, at least they managed to recover some pride with the roster change at the end of the split. That gives me hope that they might be able to keep together a roster until things...
Like, at the end, during Super Week, you can't complain. Yeah. They took out some bigger teams in Super Week, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, there are players on this roster who absolutely deserve to be kept in the LJL. They have, again, they were similarly hit by the visa issues the Jesters were, and, you know, off what was the first time for this organization in playoffs, spring, looking competitive, particularly towards the second half, to then have to kind of rebuild all over again in summer at the very late notice.
Yeah.
Kind of scuppered them early on. You know, Jesters were hit harder, don't get me wrong, but even so, tough work. And you kind of saw them try and make a last gasp from Super Week, but it just too little too, man.
We'll get some time to holistically look at this team across this split. I guess we'll do that in another podcast.
It'll be on next week's podcast. Probably.
Yeah, we'll do all that kind of stuff. But this week in particular, went 1-1. At least they took 2 wins off of 2 top teams in Super Week, so that's something to be proud of. But yeah, kind of sucks for them. Just sucks. That's the end of it, really.
Yeah. But they still beat the other team that was at the bottom, so at least they can be like, we want the worst, lads! We want the worst! And that's what they should take. They weren't the worst, at least. So go from there. And you still played with the sub, and you were picking up wins versus the top team, so at least that's something. Gentlemen, we've been rallying through these teams pretty quick, and now we've got a really disappointing team to talk about, and that's Burning Core. What the...
Oh.
Okay, so... Oh, I'm allowed to swear on this podcast. What the fuck happened to Burning Core this week? They went from me thinking, oh, I don't think Burning Core... I think Burning Core could be a good contender.
I think you said they're even like your third favorite team.
Yeah,
well, the third best team for you.
Yeah,
and honestly, I would have agreed with you. I would have been... I've been there going like, hey, you know what? I probably don't disagree with that.
No, not
I
anymore.
do think that... Again, you know, last week and the week before that, I think I started saying, you know, there are formulas to beat certain teams.
Yep.
Burning Core, we've kind of known that for a while. It just hadn't been exposed for a little while. We were reminded again, if you shut once down, they are a team and a ship without a rudder.
Well, only Ray Farkey, really.
Well, yeah. And
like, the sail. Where's the rudder?
There is something to that, because I remember putting out that tweet saying, oh Lord wants us another carry champion, because Kha'Zix was in meta, and he had a couple ridiculously good games on that champion. Kha'Zix, I think, as we've been discovering and discussing in general as sort of analysts and people in the community, is that, like, it's great into certain matchups, but, like, picking it universally, especially versus teams that have strong junglers, and strong junglers who know how to follow early game plans. So I'm talking Blank, I'm talking Boogie, Steel to an extent early on, can really punish Kha'Zix.
A lot of LJL junglers aren't bad at that. Even Hatchemetra and Tussle aren't awful in that field.
Yeah, and Kha'Zix doesn't really actually skirmish all that well until A, at least level 3, and B, Warrior Enchant, frankly, to really get the most out of his ridiculous AD scalings. Until that point, actually, he's very squishy. And you can CC him, and he regrets his life immensely. The game versus V3, Boogie made Kha'Zix completely non-factor off really good level 1, forcing a red buff invade and stopping Kha'Zix taking the opposing red buff, and then finding him level 3 to level 2, at which point Kha'Zix was out of the game. He managed to get 1 kill later on with a very aggressive invade from Boogie around red buff around 10 minutes, something like that. That was it. Boogie once ended 1-5-2 in that game.
I mean, it's important to note that this was Boogie playing Lee Sin, and in all fairness, Clid believes that Lee Sin is the best jungler still in the game at the moment.
Can be.
I don't disagree if you're really good at that champion.
And that's the jungler for Genji, if anyone's not aware. That I got that information by listening to another podcast, the Pog State, and that's where they were like, I interviewed him. He thinks it's broken, and he's really confused why people still don't play it as often as they should.
I know that Tarzan, who's a bit of a
controversial figure.
What call it? Infamous streamer in NA, but he is a very very talented and respected for his game knowledge, at least, jungler in NA, a very tough challenger. He bans Lee Sin every game. He just bans it every game, and everyone he coaches says, "Look, just ban this champion. He makes your life too hard as a carry jungler. You can't outduel this guy."
Yeah.
If you get played, oh no, go on.
I was just saying, like, the thing with Lee Sin, right, is it's the height you can get to on that champion in terms of what options are available to you at any given point in a game are so high. Now, the floor to execute them is also super high, so you've got to kind of be right up here to get it done. But if you have the mechanics of someone like Clid, of someone like, if you go to the LPL, Karsa, for example, has ruined
that's who I was thinking.
the entire league on that
VCS, most of their junglers.
Levi,
and then we can bring it back round to us. Once and Boogie are both the two. Boogie is the man that played
Blank, actually. Really, really good Lee Sin.
Blank can play it beautifully, and Once, I believe, would be a good Lee Sin player. I believe we've seen him play Lee Sin.
Well, Once, he's crushed on it. He had the Lee Sin Yumi game in spring where he...
Oh, that's right.
He was needed. Was absolutely amazing.
But he did have a Lee Sin game this week.
No, he did.
He did. And that's why I kind of started this narrative of Lee Sin.
Oh, good point.
Because the highs that he played against and the lows that he started on really emphasize the point that you brought up, I believe, Nymaera, about Once being a lot of Burning Cores playthrough, right? That's what you started with, right?
Yeah, it's like he's the rudder for the whole team. This guy is the guy that directs the team, because Rayfarki, really, really good, but top lane is not really the person leading the charge in most engagements.
No.
I think that Proud has been stepping into that role more. But if Once gets shut down, it's really looking rough for Burning Core.
Let's be real. Proud has problems in their bot lane because of who he's also attached to.
Yeah, I think...
That being said, I think Yui had one of his best weeks.
He did.
I think that he's not been as much of a liability. It doesn't mean he's a strong point. I think that particularly his Senna game against V3 was
solid.
Not awful.
Yeah,
solid.
It's all right.
It's not awful. I'd question why he built Black Cleaver on Senna. I have a lot of issues with that, losing to Shopkeeper. But at least this week I give him a bit of a pass, because he's done better. He's not been the lose condition you can sometimes be. But Once really capitulated against both Tussle and Boogie, and that it sucked to see. Really, it really sucked.
So the reason Lee Sin is strong is because he just has so many options available to him. The most junglers, you just have more things you can do at any given. They're really hard to execute, and if you recall, I said there is a skill floor. If you don't reach that skill floor, you can just in a game away, and you become free gold. You dive in and just regret things, and you got to hope for the best kick flash of your life. Where other, like, the baseline utility of certain champions, at least with the execution, I know most of the LEC junglers reckon that Volibear is the best jungler right now because he is just the strongest dueler. He outduels every single jungler in the game. That's their read on it. You can stun people, you have so much damage, you have a shield, you can run people down. Lee Sin jumps at you, you press Q, he's stunned, he takes all the autos and has to run away.
I don't think that's a crazy analysis there. Tussle enjoyed doing exactly what you stated to him on that Volibear. He was just like, hi, Lee Sin, 4-1-7 at the end of the game. You're 0-5-6. And I think this is going to be an important point for Burning Core moving forward. Once needs to not... Because I don't think Burning Core necessarily need Once to be a full carry jungler. I think they just need him to kind of lead the charge. And you could do that on champions like Sejuani, like Trundle. You can still play these champions. They're not... Whether they're good or not is a whole other kettle of fish. But there are champions he could play that he doesn't have to explicitly carry on. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also causing problems though for the team.
Yeah.
And we can't blame Once for all of it.
He was a bit of a placeholder this week.
Yeah,
he's been a placeholder for the split. Really, he's not been a pot. He's occasionally made enemy mids, which we've thought was middling, look good, and that's not so great. He's not been the lose condition again. He has been that more often than Yu-Gi-Oh.
Agreed.
Mostly, as Sam's saying. He's not going to output damage, guys. This guy is... Yeah, you
DPM
can't
is
give
very
him
low.
damaging champions. But then the problem is, even on the champions, which he looked really good, I thought he had a really good set game a week or two ago.
He did. And then...
No,
and then this
not
week.
this week.
No, he
Not
went
this week. He played
0-5
Set versus Orianna, and the Orianna took him to pieces, just completely.
I mean,
Yeah.
the part that really bugged me with Yu-Gi-Oh playing on this set is he just basically let Dasher just move the ball on top of him a bunch, ult him, and then he's just like, oh no, I need to run away. Dasher just goes, I'll flash auto ball kill you, and then it's just kind of like, Tussle, I actually didn't need you. I know it looked like I should have needed you, because he should flash away.
Yeah.
But I killed him, and Tussle's
Yeah.
just like, all right, mate, got an assist.
like-
I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, there was like the one nearly good play, and again, I'm aware we talk about the Hawks, I'm sure we'll talk about soon later on, but the one nearly good play from UJ that game was when he went to go for a massive haymaker that would have killed a couple people.
Yeah.
And then the one death Dasher had in that game was him shockwaving the set out of the haymaker true damage area. He died, like, Orianna dies, but he saves the rest of his team. He still goes 1-for-1 doing that, and it's like the one play that Yu-Gi-Oh saw that he tried to make that game didn't work.
My worry is, I know that I somewhat agree in the fact that once could be really good at leading the charge on Sejuani, Trundle, whatever. There has to be some kind of compensation in damage elsewhere.
I agree.
It's not gonna come
Yeah,
from Yu-Gi-Oh.
he's so much of their damage share.
Maybe if Yuhi steps up and has weeks which are, because going into playoffs in round 1, maybe if he gets center a lot, maybe if he has some okay Ash and Aphelios games, that's enough. I doubt it. I don't put that... I see where you're coming from, and if it wasn't the same mid and bot lane, I would really love to see that. It's not happening in this team.
Yeah,
for
I
me.
mean, what once does 21% of their damage, almost 22%,
Yeah,
and what
huge.
Yu-Gi-Oh's doing 17. Proud's doing 10%. It's worrying.
That shouldn't happen from... Yeah, that shouldn't happen.
It's very worrying. And this will raise a question which we will touch on once we go on to next podcast episode. But Burning Core in playoffs put some question marks out there for me for them, especially as their losses were to number 1 seed and a seed they should have been closer to. And let's talk about that seed, I think. Unless you guys have more you want to mention about
no,
Burning
Can I just?
no, let's move on.
I'll just add in this last bit of stat, just
for
so we can before we move on Burning Core. So I've got the damage percentages of the players from Burning Core. Once is at 22%, which is pretty damn huge for a jungler.
That's what I just said.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, so, but wait, so did you say that as well? So I was looking for the stats, so I didn't realize you pulled them up. Did you pull up Yu-Gi-Oh's mid lane stats
Yeah,
as well?
I said that was 17.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, yep, cool. In that case, ignore me. I went looking for it. Yeah, that was all I wanted to bring up. Was Yu-Gi-Oh's mid lane stat 70% is not good enough for a mid laner, but you've said it already, so continue.
It's all right, buddy. It's all right. Let's
Sorry.
now talk about the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. This is an org that was only started, was kind of recovered some of the players from USG that fell apart at the end of summer in 2019. The Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks, this is their first playoffs they're going to be in. They had an awful spring split, but have recovered to a respectable 7-7 at the end. Went 2-0 at the end, picking up wins against, well, we've already covered Burning Core. And they also picked up a win against Axis, who we said were having a slight resurgence. It's good to kind of at least make sure they're not the top, even if they're the top of the bottom 4. Or / bottom 5 because they're tied with DFM, but we'll talk about them in a moment. If they're tied there, that puts them in a really nice place to kind of be looking and go, well, we're at least halfway in the standings and we can only look up moving forward for them, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, they've come a long way from where we said, yeah, they've kind of got some soft wins they've been gifted here. Not sure how good they
That's
are
true.
to the point now where we said, actually, over Super Week, they looked like a much improved team on a systematic level, I think is the way they put it. They pulled in some new coaches, some big names. We said before, like ex-KT Rolster's coach for like 8 years, which is pretty bloody absurd, along with an ex-Flash Wolf come Jin Air coach. Like that's some fairly tenured people who've come in, and they just look so much more cohesive and constructive. Particularly, actually, for me, it's Aramik being less of a lose factor in the top lane when it's bad, when it's weak side, and Tussle and Dasher getting to have a bit more breathing space to do what they're good at has been a real revelation for this squad. I think week 7, the last week here, there wasn't anything special here, but the wins were pretty clean, even if the enemies didn't exactly make it hard on them.
For me, Hawks winning in relatively formulaic fashion is very much a positive, though. The way I would say, the change I would say in the Hawks now is that they are a much more balanced team. You know, it's not
That's
just
the way I
really
phrase it.
skewed
That's the
to
way I
one member or another. Honey been performing very well. I think that Honey has been one of the better AD carries, maybe even top 3 actually in this last
agree.
couple. I think that, and this is someone that obviously Lexi was very right to bring up at the start of spring, saying, yo, this guy's like Korean challenger, rookie coming in. You can never discount like a Korean rookie coming in, because if people are scouted correctly, that's always going to be a threat. It took him a while to get to that point. It took him
a whole split.
A split now.
Yeah.
A split and a half, maybe.
Actually, yeah, that's
no.
fair.
So maybe I can't remember exactly what he was doing at the start of summer. But yeah, and the important thing for me, he's doing it on multiple picks. He's doing it on multiple picks. He's picking out a good Jhin. That's very important. And this allows Pooh to not just play Peel supports. It allows him to play some different stuff, which he's been doing pretty well on. It allows him to kind of take up some of the engaging duties that other champions might have, other roles might have done.
I'd agree.
My worry for them is that Aramik is still pretty bad from behind. I don't know how they can play around strong top side and bot side, but they've been managing to do it in the last couple of weeks, so tentatively looking pretty solid.
And moving forward for the Hawks, they should at least be very comfortable with their current lineup. This is at least they've got a core roster which they can build upon.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do wonder how much just having some Korean coaches now is just affecting the team morale now, because it almost feels like Honey's playing night and day better. And
there's 3 Korean nationals on that squad, so you know, like Honey and Dasher, and while Tussle's been in the LJL for years and years and years and speaks good Japanese at this point, there's still a certain amount of historic culture there, which just helps having some people there who can teach you with a bit of shared experience. That empathy could be really huge.
Yeah, and now having the coaching staff, having a large amount of background management, obviously reprieves the players, and their main coach, that was Oeka, who is still their head coach, reprieves him now of other responsibilities, so maybe other people can manage stuff, and it's only going to be good for the Hawks, and honestly, I'm optimistic for them coming into playoffs.
That's fair.
The other team... go for it.
Just saying, like, as a bit of a final point on Honey in particular, like, his kill participation's really damn high. He's up at 85%, which is pretty huge. Higher than anybody else on the team. By over 10%, actually. Or 10% over any other member.
Like, one of the, like...
he's
got the highest he's the highest CPM, in the LJL, not just his team.
Yeah. Wow, there you go. So like that's pretty huge. I mean, he's got 35% of the team's damage as well. You know, that's the highest on the squad. Like, this guy's been performing pretty well, and granted, it's been skewed a little bit over a few games, but that's good news. Then again, we've also seen Hawks crumble when they get slapped in the bot lane. Go look at that CGA game where Gango gets 51% of the damage share running on the bot lane. So, like, yes, Honey from behind is a different. But
well, this is something actually, you know, talking about that kill participation, he's actually the highest non-jungler in terms of kill participation. That's pretty huge.
Damn!
He's actually higher than his own jungler.
Yeah, he is. His, like, Tussle's at 69%.
Nice. That's huge. What? That's crazy.
I didn't realize. Wow.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't quite realized that. That's
just bringing it out now.
Not bad, actually. Not bad.
He's got a higher vision score per minute than anyone else on his team as well, aside from his support. And just 0.1% behind. No, 0.01% behind Tussle. Like, he's 1.46 to 1.47. Like, this guy's playing a good game of League of Legends right now on multiple levels.
It took him a while, but I knew scouting out Honey way back when would pay off, and now it's started to pay off. Hopefully, though, we'll get another tenure of him, at least with us in the LJ.
Gotta hope.
Yeah. And no one's going to be aggressive and try and pinch him for amateur or... an amateur Korean team looking for a good bot laner. The other team is also tied on 7-7. These two teams are tied for 4th place. This is why we had to go that tied 5th/4th place. It's weird. Detonation Focus Me. They had a 2-0 week, and it's been a while since I've actually said that about Detonation Focus Me. One of those games, however, was against the Rascal Jesters, so we're going to take that with a pinch of salt for what it is. But the other game was against Chris Gaming Act, and you know what? This felt like at least a return to form for DFM. However, there are some things we will be talking about Chris Gaming Act later, so let's try and not get too much into CGA at the moment. But leave it with Rascal DFM. Return to form, right, lads?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll say in regards to the CGA thing, which we'll expand on later, is that DFM team fought really well.
really well.
And we talk about CJ being a really good team. They beat them at their own game, like, significantly.
I'd agree.
DFM had a really good game there. And that's if we're going to focus on that game. Yeah, no, DFM, I've definitely had my complaints about them. I think, we hold them to high standards, but this week was good. It is starting to give me those worries for playoffs again. If DFM back, this is how it starts.
I mean, so we had some very obvious errors in the way DFM were playing. We had issues with the way they were drafting, what they were priorities, and we're asking, well, where is the Camille? What are you doing there? They're just on a number of levels. They're like, okay, why are you picking Ziggs here? Ebby plays a great Ornn. Why is this being picked here? This week, the drafts were just a lot cleaner. They felt it. Two, we had issues about how they were playing around objectives hit about the 15-minute mark. Second, Herald. Third, Drake. They would be walking in blind and getting picked off. They had some really good Herald and Dragon fights this game around where they were picking off people effectively beforehand or setting up well for objectives beforehand. These little things where we're saying, DFM, what the hell are you doing on a really basic level? This week, for the first time in a while, we went, actually, you played that really cleanly around those kind of things. Plus, there were some good mechanical outplays. Yeah, one of those games against Rascal Jesters, but bluntly, going 7-1 and 10 on your top laner and 8-1 and 13 on your jungler is still fairly impressive. That's worth some praise.
The caveat against Rascal Jester is that actually they actually won that hard against the part of the team that is really good. Their top jungle is not bad. Cog and Hatchmetcher have been decent.
But watching that game back, they did kind of hard into points.
They did. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of complaints about how they played, but still, they did. They had. It's better than saying, because we've had. I mean, over Super Week, I was sat there going like, wow, they have this really easy play they can make. Wow, this is like something they should be doing here, and they weren't doing it. At least this game, they pulled the trigger every time the opportunity was valid, and that's something.
Yeah.
Also, return to form for Ebby and Steel, frankly, because they were really bad for quite a while.
Gang had a really good week too.
I'm going to put that caveat there for Ebby specifically and Steel, as we've been having more concerns and problems. This is a good week. This isn't enough for me to write them off and say you guys are good again.
Oh yeah.
You need to keep doing this because you played against the bottom team and stomped them. Okay, good job. You can stomp a bottom team. That should be expected from you when you're in first place, because that's where we all expected you to be. Okay, and then you had a good game versus CGA. That's a really good start. And that's the only top team that you've beaten, but you went 1-on-1 against
That's a
them.
big thing. That's a big thing.
Hopefully this is a sign of things to come for DFM, because that means we're going to have 4 top teams, and depending on the tiebreaker game, we could have 5 top teams. But first, we need to see that. Well, and it depends how Burning Core play. Because if Burning Core can play like a third-place team, it'll be great. If they play like a 6th-place team,
there's a lot of variance to take into account.
I'd agree.
Sam is back. Of course, I thought his camera just recently died there. Yeah, no, if DFM are back and Burning Core turn around what they did, yeah, this class is going to be, even round 1 is going to be super competitive. And we'll talk about that at another point. I think, actually, the guy which I think really stepped up for me was Gang. I think Gang's Bard is looking terrific.
Yeah.
Check out.
The early Leona versus Art, where he hit 2 Zenith Blades early that just screwed the game.
I will caveat Nagi played
Nagi played it really poorly. He did, but Gang's got to land those 2. So
that became the rest of the game where we just started talking about Nautilus.
Flaming about it.
We were just like, this is because when ND played it versus Grendel, and we were just like, this is how you do it.
He played this really well.
Yeah, it's like, this is how you do it. And then then in all fairness, Corporal actually did that a few times as well. And I'm like, Nagi, please take notes for fuck's sake. Everyone can.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Feels bad, man. I don't want to flame them.
The fact that it wasn't good.
But yeah, DFM return to form and hopeful for things to come, I think, is fairness.
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out in a few hours' time.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess, okay, we won't spend too much time on them, but I will say the big thing about the drafts for me is that they weren't just doing like very slim win condition comps, which we noticed right the way back from their first loss against Sengoku, when they were just like at the
we had noticed this in spring.
We noticed this and just like, this draft is really kind of slim.
It's a bit of an arrogant
draft. Are you actually playing
trying to
this game
win
on hard?
with weirdness?
It's just like playing the game on hard mode. Whereas like both drafts they had like so many options to play through, and I was impressed by that. So I think that they looked good on both the metrics. I was not impressed by them over Super Week. The question is this consistent? We only have 2 games, and so that tiebreaker match will be very important, particularly because if they end up in 5th seed, potentially that's quite important. So we'll see.
We will
Hoping to see them at this level.
Absolutely, yeah. CGA. Crest Gaming Act boys are tied coming into this. Well, actually, no, they were our second place team.
Second place,
They
9-3.
had a loss to give to at least afford a tiebreaker game. They had it all. They at worst had to go 1-1. They had Destination Focus Me and Sengoku. These were teams that they had actually beaten. So, coming into this, CGA should be favored. They're the coin flip, and they'll probably think, coin flip. Nymaera, Initialize, take this away.
Alright, so.
Whoops.
This is what we say about Crest Gaming Act, and it's basically that there is, well, they always have some win conditions. Namely that Ari is really good, so is their bot lane when they get to play strong side. When it goes the other side, if Ari is not a win condition, if the bot lane fail to realise that sometimes they're not the strong side of the map, they can fall to pieces. I know Nymaera has a lot of thoughts on the DFM game, but the Sengoku game was a little sad, man. Like,
enough?
Gango and Grendel got slapped. Like,
Is this...
40% volume up. Yeah, sure.
that should be strong enough.
like,
Jesus
oh my
Christ.
god,
I think,
something in there.
CJ is such a... They're our highest variance team in the LJL, and it's been actually quite impressive to see that they did go 9-3 in the first place. This is kind of coming for... This has been coming for a while.
Let's be real.
I will
Gango
at
at
the
the end of one of these games had 3 fucking crit cloaks at the...
It's
Sorry,
so stupid.
Nymaera.
That
Go
was
ahead,
how
continue.
far behind he was.
No, I will add in a caveat.
Sure.
Both of these losses were on blue side, where I think CJ are
I called
weaker.
this one out.
They are still third seed. They will get side choice for the first 2 rounds were they to make it to round 2. So in round 1 they'll be the highest remaining seed if they were to make that. Potentially that means they have 2 5-game series where they screw up on blue side because people have solved them there, and then they get counterpick for Aria on red side on every red side game which they get to choose. Potentially that gets them through to round 3. They have a lot of issues, guys. We knew this. We did notify...
Yeah.
We notified the world. It's like, don't let them team fight. It's not very good.
And then the world listened, apparently. So maybe someone
think,
at
yeah,
DFM and Sengoku management is listening to us, and they're just like, the English lads figured it out, lads. We just figured it out. Don't fight them, lads. Don't fight. I know it sounds crazy. Don't fight them. And then they suddenly go 2-0, and they're like, these British lads know something. All right.
I do think the caveat in these 2 games was actually no, I think that this is actually something which was really kind of distressing on the other side of it, is that
True.
they actually got out team fought.
Yeah.
It was kind of against the narrative. Against
Yeah,
DFM,
they did.
certainly. There was a really big moment where I think DFM's draft against them was really good. They had 3 winning lanes, and actually CJ did poorly in early lane versus in both their games. And that's something which we'll have to touch on a bit when we talk about the other teams and talk about it from the more positive aspect. Yeah, so I think that there's this one particular team fight in CGA DFM where things were quite even, and then Gango eats like a full Heimerdinger W to the face with a comment and loses half his HP. And this is kind of like while everyone's clustered around Raptor Pit.
Yeah.
He walks back around, and then as soon as that happens, like the rest of the team gets engaged onto him. Like, that is really basic. You can't be posturing there when your AD carry can't do stuff. He's going to lifesteal, guys. You can't fight.
No.
They got caught out, they died.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of team fighting instinct and like the knowledge that a play can or cannot be made, which was missing this week.
Yeah,
Was
and
missing this week in the team fights.
It was
also,
missing.
it's also bluntly when Arya has a quiet game was put behind him. Frankly, he ended 1-4-1 and was permanently at 1/3 HP because he was eating Heimerdinger rockets the entire laning phase.
I
Like,
want to give credit partly more to Gang for actually shutting down
I agree.
Ardia.
oh
I agree.
yes, the tempered
Gang
face
and
was
Steel.
stunning.
Gang and Steel.
He just
Trundle
wasn't...
Pillars gang ults.
Yeah. Trundle Pillars
Yeah.
gang ults just basically
Yeah.
denied that. And in all fairness, again against Aria, talking about quiet games, apparently Apperman just playing Mordekaiser just is a win button for Sengoku. Apparently just play Mordekaiser against CGA and you just win the game because Aria's out of the fight.
I'll also say that Apperman basically he also had something of the fact that, like, okay, so CGA heavy team fight comp, but the main part of their team fight is this wombo combo top laner. Ken and Wukong are those kind of big button ultimates where you just go into the backline and blow people up. What does Mordekaiser do really well?
Too, actually.
Break that up, yeah.
Anyone
You
that
just-
wants to just mess up the backline.
So you just pull them into the death realm, and suddenly it's like, well, shit.
Well, it's Realm
now
of
how do we
Death,
fight?
not Death Realm. It's Realm of Death, as I learnt today. I was like,
Realm of Death.
what is it actually called? It's Realm of Death. I'm like, no, it's the Death Realm. Lads, let's be
I know,
real.
but League of Legends parlance is Death Realm, so I'm sticking with it. You're right.
I agree with you.
Like,
I agree.
I was gonna say something. What was I gonna say?
Gango and Grendel had a...
So the big thing about the DFM game is that, so you know this is the whole, like, the blue side, red side problem. DFM 5-banned mid and then had counter pick last pick mid lane, and it worked out really well for DFM. Even then, I think Arya was in a position where if his team had played better, would have been in a position to maybe team fight. There are 2 plays in particular. There's one, but they're both really awkward plays in mid lane where Arya dies on an engage onto the Heimerdinger, which Azir can do. And there's one where Unica is just not in position at the right time. He's charging his Het Flash like a second or 2 late, and he doesn't make it into mid to follow up on the play, and then all of the rockets land onto Arya and just dies. So that's one big thing. So I'm like, okay, that's miscommunication between teammates. And there's like, there's another one where like he goes 1 for 1. I'm like, really, if he ends up living in those, it's pretty big for the team fight because he gets extra CDR because he completes his Nash's tooth earlier. Okay, don't get me wrong, he got caught out a lot, and a lot of it is still on him. I do think it's more of a coordination thing, and that's kind of shared on the opportunity thing, on the burden rather, in terms of responsibility. So the caveat is, okay, this is the low end of the variance from CGA. I don't think this is like warning signs for CJ. I'm more like, okay, it's a bad week, but whatever.
Well, can I add 2 warning signs that I have spotted though?
Sure, go, yeah.
So 1, this team doesn't play Karma. They ban it blue side every time. They have not played it once this time.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah.
Yeah, that blue side was weird. But...
So the fact that they won't put it bot, and Arya doesn't want to play it, is problematic for this squad, particularly on blue side.
But then DFM were also banning Karma blue side, so what the fuck's going on?
Well, but mainly because they want a first pick set. The first pick set in the LJL is part of the reason people are doing that, because they want to flex a set, which is something. But either way, the fact they haven't played it at all either worries me a little, whereas, you know, like V3 are at least like flexing it top.
Number 2.
The second thing is that we kind of saw with that DFM particularly, 5-man ban mid, and you're on red side, so at that point, Arya can't get counter pick. Is something of a problem if Arya can't get a matchup where he has the straight counter pick. Sometimes find that's not always a guarantee loss, don't get me wrong, but they look more weak when that happens.
Sure.
And I think that sometimes ties in a little bit with
so just emphasizing what Alex said, like it's really important to try and like just prevent Arya from doing what he wants to do.
Yeah.
There's actually another reason blue side's bad for CGA too. Much easier to dive bot lane from blue side. Because you have that one, so there's tri-brush and then there's that one brush like a little bit further up. And you have the blast cone over to that point, which is really important. So Gango gets caught out there all the time. And their bot lane really suffers on blue side. In fact, actually the game where they lost against V3 at the start of the split when they put onto weak side was
blue
partly
side
due to them being blue side bot weak side as well. Really awkward.
Yeah.
So just in terms of geography, and again, I kind of bring this up with a couple of champions, but it's specifically towards bot lane, being on weak side and blue side, really kind of crappy. And CJ do not deal with it well. So red side, like they said, I expect them to do well, or at least I expect them to maybe 3-2 the first 2 series, if they go into playoffs, but we'll see.
Yeah,
see.
I mean,
are CGI, well, is Arya specifically, well, actually, Alex, you mentioned this earlier, Art's in Elo Hell. Is Arya actually just in Elo Hell? Is his team just that much worse than where he's playing?
He's the best player on his team.
That went without
not
saying.
in Elo Hell. Nap's actually very good.
But he's not always a carry.
I think it's more like a disconnection of parts rather than the parts not being sufficient.
But where do you think? Where do you think?
Okay.
Well, I mean, then it comes. Where do you rank your
table? Jungler. He's not a liability.
And that the
problem is, it's just that they played against 2 top teams this week, and they were exposed. I did not like they were completely shut out.
No.
The game against Sengoku was actually relatively even.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
Sure.
Are we going to be keeping Arya if he's in Elo Hell? That's where you knew it was coming. Because if he's not got the best people in their role, I think Nap is fine. I don't think that's going to be a question. But is he going to hang around?
Depends on the
Question.
money. Genuinely depends on the money.
And where
that's
he's
what it comes down
going,
to.
and if it's a guaranteed
Also,
world spot and everything else. And
That's a big thing.
Also,
Yeah.
if you're going to Korean Challenger where there's no chance of Worlds, where there's a slim chance of World in the LJL, particularly if, say, someone like, I don't know, who's got room for a Korean import slot. I don't know, it's one of the DFM guys is getting, I think Gang's getting residency.
Yeah,
fairly
but
soon.
then that's
maybe
also
say
Siros.
DFM shell out money. Yeah,
That would be huge. Actually.
that kind of
I mean,
thing.
that's
You
what
know,
we
there's
said
room
that.
then.
We said that in our split break, the break between splits. But yeah, potentially with DFM getting an import slot, they do something weird with their roster. I don't know. I mean, loyalty to roster is a really big
Huge thing in
thing for a lot
Japan.
of Korean players, but also the LGL does handshake between players quite a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
unless you're
We've seen players being
Siros and Utapon, and then you're...
Yeah, they've
Sure, yeah,
just
no,
never
those
left.
guys, but then it depends on whether the players who have been. I mean, we don't have access to the interviews, I guess, but like, how long do these guys see themselves playing in the LGL?
Anyone, though, listening to us, though, we would love to actually have someone to translate those interviews. It was
yeah.
actually a project I was planning to do, but because the closed caption thing's now getting
Yes.
removed off of YouTube, that whole project I was planning on working on over the summer split, or actually over the Worlds and 6-month break we'll be getting, I was like, ooh, this will be something good to at least try and get someone in. Now we're going to have to do it all in-house, which is just fucking annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not sure what I'm
Pay
talking
us if you want
about,
us to do that.
YouTube are basically shutting down their
I
creator
did
closed
see. I
caption
saw you tweet about
service,
it.
which is just really annoying, and it's really frustrating because any content that we did, if people wanted to listen in Japanese and someone just literally wanted to close caption us, it's going away unless we bring it all in-house, and it's a whole thing. I digress, though. CGA, hopefully they're not fully solved. Hopefully the team stays as a unit, and they could at least get definitely to round 3. I think that's a good place to put it, Alex.
Yeah, I'm just worried that if V3 or Sengoku jump down from that upper bracket, which of course one of them will do, and they go against CGA with side choice 3 out of the 5
yeah.
games, and they're both teams which have shown ways to beat this team, they'd have to step it up a notch. And CGA are a high variance team. Maybe they'd do it. It's not likely for me, but I think round 3 is maybe likely. We'll see.
We will see. Our second place team, who honestly, I didn't think were actually going to get second place, in all fairness. They had a 2-0 week.
Yep.
I thought they'd at least be facing for the tiebreaker for second place. That would be the big poggers, like, tiebreaker match. We didn't get it, because Sengoku just went 2-0. Credit to them, as we've already mentioned, they beat Crest Gaming Act in this week. But you know what? That's not even the impressive one. Hilariously, I'm saying that. V3. They beat V3 Esports. They gave V3 their second loss. Their second only loss. The other one was to Crest Gaming Act, who we've mentioned have the potential to beat everybody in the world, but also could just lose to anybody
Lose to
in the
absolutely
world.
nobody.
Hey!
They could lose to an
Absolute
academy,
nobodies.
like NA academy team of randomers, and they'd be like,
Yep.
yeah, that makes sense. They could also just beat Genji or Top Esports. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? Anything's fucking
Yeah.
possible. But
You
this
might
is
think
about-
that's an overstatement. Honestly, maybe. You can't rule
they
it
are
out.
genuinely sometimes that good and that bad at the
Yeah.
same time. But we're talking about Sengoku Gaming. Sengoku beat both Crest Gaming Act and V3 Esports. Now, the V3 Esports is going to be a huge one because of what that means for playoffs. We'll talk a little bit about that more probably on the V3 side of things upon reflection. But my god, gentlemen, Sengoku feel like they're back to where they were a few weeks earlier before Super Week. Week 4 Sengoku is where we had them pegged, where we were like, yeah, tied second place. This is where they feel about right. Now they feel great now.
Really do.
Yeah, completely agree. Sengoku are in a...
I can tell you're both looking for
interesting-
stats. You're both like,
Yeah,
oh,
I was looking for stats, but it's fine. I'll take this one for a minute. So we had a 2-0 from Sengoku Gaming after they had the 2-2 Super Week
Yep.
where they looked really off.
well, they lost
frankly.
to Axis, for fuck's
Yeah,
sake.
they lost to Axis. You know,
It's convincingly so. Too.
yeah, and it was
Yeah.
like, and much like this week, we saw Crest Gaming Axe flaws come back to bite them in Super Week. We saw what happens if Sengoku's mid jungle end up in a place where they can't impact the rest of the map. Appleman's left out to dry. He gets caught out in 1v X's. Pyrian just ends up not being able to play his control mages because they're dying all the time. Yada yada yada. This week was much better again from Sengoku Gaming.
All members.
Yeah, genuinely. Yutori Miyashi stepped up for the
Popped
first
off.
time in a while. He really did. His Jin was pretty stellar. And it's been a while since we've seen Sengoku Gaming index into their bot lane being their carry. And Blank had, the fact that he went against Boogie and made Boogie's life hell is fantastic news.
Felt good, man.
Just like, felt really good. And also Pyrian, it was Blank and Pyrian in that game, he had a fabulous game where he was 6-1-3 on the Zoe, which did a lot of damn work. They got 8-2-3 on the Graves, which again did a lot of damn work. So
and what I
credit where credit's due
about the Sengoku lineups between their two games, they played the same bot lane, but they played very different. Their mid jungle top was very different in how they wanted to execute certain fights. And it was really nice to see that they can be like, yeah, we can just throw Yutori and Enti on the same ship. They can play other things. We all know they can play other things. We're gonna just let them just school you fuckers on how to do this, and we're going to play completely two different things, so you have no idea to prepare, because we already know that they're probably going to win in the bot lane because we're comfortable, because it's all, in all fairness, they might have just gone, we think we're going to win this. How they did the pick and ban phase, they prioritized getting Blank, Pyrian and Appamen their picks over that, especially Appamen, remember, they last picked in that Mordekaiser, and it worked out beautifully.
Because last podcast, I raised the question about Yutori and Appamen. Both of them had really good weeks. Really, really good weeks.
Yeah, they did.
We've talked about Appamen's champion pool.
We have.
We did also say if there was a formula to beat Sengoku, it's to get Appamen into a uncomfortable position. Neither of these teams managed to do that. No. Neither of these teams managed to do that.
V3 tried to put the Aatrox behind early with the Camille, got a great trade early on. They then went 1-for-1 in the dive and Appamen survived. Camille teleports boss, loses waves, comes back under level.
That was really well played by Pyrian.
And then gets killed solo under turret by the Aatrox. Like, the fact that, that was great. A great play from Appamen, who plays a lot of good, who plays a lot of Aatrox, don't get me wrong, but they also, for me, it was sort of saying, like, well, not just that. I've also said, actually, historically, Paz has been a pretty good Camille player, but there's also something to be said for, I have been asking Paz to take some of the pressure off the bot side to be the one performing and be a little bit more of a split push threat.
You sure?
That wasn't a good look for V3 in that game.
It wasn't.
And honestly, I thought that draft against V3, so that V3 draft would be really good against Appamen, because drafting someone like a Kha'Zix into Appamen, who's always isolated,
Kha'Zix
should normally work. They pulled it off once that game, it just didn't matter for the rest of it. Didn't matter for the rest of it.
And when they pulled it off, it wasn't clean. And then against the Chris Gaming Act, who we started talking about from Chris Gaming Act's side, Appamen on this Mordekaiser just removed Ariel or Nap from basically every team fight. Pyrian playing this set was landing like 2-3-man face breakers.
His team fights were really, really good.
And Yutori Muashi, something we said on cast, and then when we have our post game, we talk about it. His curtain call ultimates were night and day different between how we've seen him play it in Super Week to this, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to set up a point there, and I thought one of you might take it other than just agreeing with me. All right, I'm the best. I can just keep saying, I'm right. I'm the best. Look at me.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think, no. Yutori's curtain calls in Super Week were kind of shit. So this was a good difference there. I'll agree with that.
You can come back to stage now, Yutori Muashi. You're back on the globe. Shakespeare, proud, all of that.
He took a fair few weeks off. Oh, to be honest, most of this summer, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, but what I will add is actually just like we said, there were some caveats for DFM's victory. Good victories, but they were against, say, Rascal Jesters. Not a good one of those victories. Like that's the one's going to come with a caveat. For this week, Sengoku Gaming beat V3 and CGA. Their direct competition, who was above them in the stand.
Also, I think a huge thing for me is, like, particularly against V3, they beat our best bot lane in the league, and they did it, like, I mean, Reiner in particular, like our best support in the league. He looked way out of his depth in that game. He was getting caught out a lot by NT, by Yutori Muashi, and that's really big. If you can punish a player of that caliber, I have hopes for Sengoku in playoffs. Like, it is competitive. I don't think this is going to be one-sided.
Yeah,
hopefully.
V3 banned the Bard, and then they didn't prioritize Reiner at all. And then second round of bans, they banned that Leona. Well, they banned Leona. Actually, no, it was first round bans. They banned Leona Thresh, and the Bard was banned. V3, I mean, Reiner, we've seen him play a lot. They also banned was that set on V3's side, which was which has been one of his best champions in all fairness. So I'm a little bit worried that maybe V3 muted their own pick potential.
Just because first pick set's a thing.
Yeah, well, I know I don't disagree with you on that. But
yeah, but I agree. It's that unfortunate collateral damage.
Yeah. Also, you got to ask. Actually, I'll put this right out there for Reiner. He's not actually played all that many champions. He's played 7 games of
hasn't
Get
needed to.
Thresh
He hasn't needed
and
to.
3 games of Set, which he's looked absolutely stunning on. But like,
Does he not play Bard?
like actually, no, he's not played Bard. He's played 1 game of Yumi. He's played 1 game of Tarnkamp and 2 games of Naughty.
Interesting. Well, there we go. I thought he had played
So,
a
like-
game of Bard, so that makes
No,
my...
he hasn't. So like,
Not
so
this
that's the
split,
kind
no,
of
he's
thing.
right.
Where I was
The
saying,
man is
actually,
right.
he's played a couple Hook champions and a Set. So actually, that's quite heavy playmaking engaged champions. It's not necessarily like Alistair kind of engaged. It's a little bit more throwaway.
But we saw Proud do that to great success, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
exactly. But like,
Is
there is
Proud
something
better
about
than Reiner?
yeah. Well, the question is actually, well, what happens if you take Thresh and Set away from Reiner,
Yeah.
and like, or you make those champions less attractive to go towards? Is there an issue? I don't know whether
Yeah.
because he's so good at those champions, and but also like, but there are other things you want to ban out. But just saying, maybe that's a concern.
Definitely could
No
be.
karma.
No
No,
karma.
you know, no karma. No,
Yeah.
no karma. No bard. We like. Where are the range supports we were expecting?
Well, I think that's because honestly, I would much prefer them to put
Ace on Karma,
onto
yeah.
you, because
Or
I
Baz.
really prefer Reiner on a playmaking support. Karma is not that. And actually, you have 2 very competent players in your solo laners, which it buffs up their laning phase and allows them to team fight, because this is a team fighting team.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it more from their side, I guess, when we... I guess I just want to cap off Sengoku myself.
That's actually-
I think that... Well, let me go back to the scoreboards.
I mean, NT had
I
a
think-
pretty strong initiation on this Nautilus. It
I
looks
agree.
very underwhelming, only going 2-11 and 2-8. But this is Nautilus. Your whole job half the time is just getting into the middle of the team, being a nuisance, using your passive to stun people, and then hopefully not dying. And he did a lot of that not dying twice. Especially, I think it was... Which game was it? It was the Crest Gaming Act game. He fucking should have died. He went down to like 10 HP and just walked off. And I'm like, alright. I'm like,
Calculated.
alright.
Oh, and the Baron fight.
Yeah.
Oh,
Was that
oh,
CTA?
disgusting.
Inches.
Was that CGA? I think it was, right?
I think it was, yeah, because it was at the Baron fight when he just ults out and just
Yes, it was so good. It was so good.
I actually I think there are some caveats, but I think that Sengoku might be the most varied team in terms of the drafts that they can play in totality.
I actually, off the top of my head, I think I agree with you.
I think that Yutori plays a fairly varied amount. NT, I mean, when you're comparing it to someone like V3 who does have some hamstrings,
let me do
CJ
a
we
Google.
know has hamstrings in there. You're kind of left with like, and Burning Core has hamstrings because they need once on certain things. You're kind of left with like Hawks DFM, DFM again hamstringed in mid lane, and potentially on a couple of the
Is
champions.
it only the Hawks?
It's basically between Hawks
So-
and Sengoku. I'm like, hey, actually, I know that Apperman's got a relatively low champion pool, but again, he's starting to expand. He's played some Camille the Split, played some Mordekaiser, and honestly, like, that's a fair. It's all right.
Yeah.
Pyrion has been one of our most varied mid laners. And
He has,
that,
actually,
particularly
looking at
playing
that now.
because also we know that like Arya, great champion pool, but
Yep.
also doesn't play tanks like set mid, doesn't
That's
play Karma.
true, where
Pyrion
Pyrion
will play
will.
both.
I'll put the caveat out for Pyrion that like there's a particular style of champion he goes towards largely, which is he does like his control mage type thing. But there is but that's come to the second.
again,
He
he
does
has
play
some
the Silas, he
diametric
does play the
play-
Set.
Yeah, he does have some diametric play opposed champions to that, which is enough for a draft phase for them to pivot.
Yes.
And I think that they pivot better than any team.
I'd agree
And
with that. In the pick
sort-
and ban phase, yeah, they play the
Yeah.
they rarely fuck up their
They're
banning
up there.
phase because
Which
if they
makes
fuck
they're
up,
up there.
Yeah. And honestly,
They're definitely-
I wouldn't mind. As I don't care if they're on red side or blue side. I think that they can counterpick for any lane. I think
Yeah.
any of their players
I
is
mean,
happy
I'll-
being given counterpick. I
I'll
think that's
say
a
that
really
you-
big thing for Sengoku.
I'll say that Yutori does not play mage.
that's a true, and that is a big thing that that in general just needs to
And
be more open.
Archer
But
doesn't
in
either,
all
though.
And then
fairness,
you-
only
no,
Utapon does, and he
Gango
only
does a
plays
little of it.
set. He
Gango
only
plays
plays
Cass.
Syndra. He only played Syndra.
Yeah,
Utapon
true.
did.
As far as exactly, Gango plays a good Cassiopeia. So,
Sure.
We don't have
so-
many major spot in general
like-
in this region.
So there's like
That is, but
there's,
that's
like-
worth to criticize, though. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah, yeah,
fair because
exactly.
that's how
And
you
like-
go
and
to
I'll say
that
the
next
same-
level,
yeah.
right?
So I kind of agree with Nymaera, and actually pretty much anything that's meta Sengoku plays within it, with the caveat there's one or two things from mid and jungle where I go, that's a bit unexpected. Like we saw the Kane game out of blank that didn't work.
that
Silas-
was
V3
V3 outdrafted them there.
Yeah, but we saw the Silas game that did, which okay, there's something there. And I was like, okay, actually Pyrion's pulled out the set mid, which is a little bit out there, and a Silas mid which is coming back a little bit, but it's a little bit.
Like, it's
left
a bit of
of
this way. I
centre.
think, like, if you're going to talk about, like, highest champion pool in top lane or the weirdest one, it's probably someone like Cog. Then in jungle, it's someone like Boogie. In mid lane, it's Arya. In bot lane, it's...
And in all
Actually, I'm not so
fairness,
sure
I
about
was recapping quickly the Sengoku Crest Gaming Act draft. Oh my god, I just really got to appreciate how good Sengoku are at the pick and ban phase. They red side R1 Set and then R2 Jin, and for some reason CGA just went B1 Ash. They could have picked Set. They chose not to, and then basically this whole draft, CGA had no idea where this set was going. They then decided at the end on that last pick with that Mordekaiser, because they would like, oh yeah, we're not going to put it into our bot lane because we're going to pick Nautilus. Then CGA respond with Thresh Wukong, and then it's like, haha, Mordekaiser, fuck you, we win. And they just lost.
Yeah,
they just lost there in that draft.
Sengoku had like a triple flex right the way till 5th pick, because they still had Set and Silas being able to be flexed around.
It was so sick. It was so sick by them. Yeah. And honestly...
They could have pivoted anywhere with that.
Yeah, they can pivot anywhere. I mean, in all fairness, they still didn't have to put the Set mid. They could have still put the Silas mid, Set jungle. I prefer the way around they actually did play personally.
No, I agree. Because I think that, honestly, someone like Set mid, I mean, it reminds me of how teams would try and beat people like Faker back in Season 5. I remember Rock's Tigers would play like... this was back when Banner Command was super strong.
Oh, Banner Command, Sion. Oh my god,
you'd play like Sion mid, and you'd play him with Banner Command, and you couldn't do anything in mid. It just meant that you nullify that lane. Playing Set is exactly the same thing in mid lane against Assassins. Like, I think Mages, we saw that with Dasher just destroying Yu-Gi-Oh! That's fine. But Echo does not have the damage to do that early game to Set. He doesn't have the range advantage either, and Set in melee matchups is really strong.
In some sense to Karma, it nullifies in a different way.
In a different way, yeah.
And you've got more playmaking.
Because Karma, you can occasionally burst out. Not with Set. Not with Set.
Talking about Karma mid, gentlemen, should we move over onto our first place team? As I was kind of making that transition with a person in the mid lane who loves playing Karma mid, won't get it for a while, might get it after what patch 10.16 is going to bring in, but that's beside the point, and that's neither here nor there. Sengoku went 1-1. This should, in theory, have been a 2-0 week to kind of assert dominance for them and to quell any non-believers that V3 are here. They didn't do that, and they had a loss to Sengoku, which we've already started to cover, but we'll go far more in depth in that. And while they did win versus Burning Core, it wasn't clean by any sense of the imagination. And while we have highlighted once is problems in Burning Core, in all credit, Paz, Boogie played pretty solidly, but there were still problems around V3.
I mean, I'll contest the Burning Core one, because I actually thought that was pretty clean from the mid-jungle in particular, because once got slapped by Boogie. So, like, I will put that caveat in. I think he had an okay mid-game and stuff, and there were one or two things where Archer and Rhino went a little deep on the Set Callista, but mostly I think pretty clean.
I disagree on Boogie, but we can talk about that in a bit.
Oh, but Boogie put once in the dirt, man. Like,
no, but he Lee syndromed a lot. He just randomly would just go super deep and die, and it's just like, mate, why are you going that deep? You can't go that deep and not... He was, like, sometimes trading 1-for-1 for no reason.
Like, there was the one death on the red buff, which I'll agree with you on. But, like, the early path thing into the early first blood...
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he didn't play well. He just died when he shouldn't have been dying. And this is... And we need to start nitpicking V3, because this is our first place team.
I can agree. I'll agree with the first blood death. I don't recall the other two deaths off the top of my head, so I can't comment on those.
Sure.
So, like, off the top of my head, I'm not sure whether I agree. I'll give you the first death he gave, though. It was dumb.
It was dumb.
But otherwise, I actually think Boogie broke Burning Core that the way he... and Paz on that Karma was
Paz
just
was so good.
So good. I actually think Karma into Vlad top lane is a really good matchup as well, because Vlad can realistically never kill that lane even in late game, because you go Athenes, it's magic resist, you push him in, you have W to heal, you out DPS him until most of the game actually. Like,
also, all your items are 3 times as cheap as his.
Yeah, so... I know. You go. Oh god, and the best. Oh, it's disgusting because so one of the interactions between Athenes has a passive where if you have base mana regen on items, it gives Athenes AP.
Oh yeah.
It's actually a pretty high conversion ratio.
Yeah.
An item which gives that is Ardent Censer, which already has relatively high AP and is also very cheap. If you get those 2 items, it
Dumb.
buffs up the Athene's AP,
Utterly dumb.
and you get just disgusting amounts of AP for 2 support items, and
they're-
you
they're
go like
both sub
death cap
3,000.
afterwards.
Yeah.
They're both sub 3,000. Like, so you get that that spike super
Is
early.
that 2,600, 2,400, something like
Yeah, I
that?
think it is that. So I think it's a
that's
grand total
the
of
cost
5,000.
each of those. Yeah. Athene's
Yeah,
is
pretty much.
2.6. Ardent's
That's
2.4.
Ardent's
Hang on.
2.4.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's
I'll double check,
They're
but I
dead
think so.
cheap, but like basically you do that. You have grasp to give yourself even more HP. Athene's gives you the magic resist too. It's
Two
like,
300 for Ardent Sensor.
that's the one. Yeah,
Christ, so cheap.
it's like this was like when Protobelt was super broken because it was just like you get it so early. But like effectively, Vladimir has to be completely poked out under turret, burn pool for stupid stuff, and then Boogie can come up and dive. In fact, I think they did that a couple of times. Just made sure he was held accountable.
Nice. Sorry. Athene's to 100 is
What?
4,400 for both items. Not even, you're like,
Whereas like
man.
Stupid.
Just to put that in context, if you were going for a first item Ludens, that's 3,200. So for 1 item, you've got like your 1 item to 1.5 items, which is actually better for those champions than Ludens is for yours most of the time. Put that on it, and yeah.
Smoke it up.
But yeah, no, I think that this kind of I actually went and VOD reviewed CGA V3 again, that game that they lost way back when, and I think it applies to one of the games this week. And again, this was in the part thing when we had like Your Way on stuff like that. It was just like a random impromptu thing, and we kind of agreed at the end of it that V3 were the better team
Yeah.
than CGA.
vision control.
Just the
setup.
draft was not set up
rotations.
for them to do anything. I think with Boogie on this Kha'Zix versus Sengoku, he found stuff he probably shouldn't have done
Oh,
anyway. There was 1 kill onto
100%.
Pyrion where I was like, wow, this is legitimately, once again, the only thing he can do on his champion this game. Much like Nidalee ganking very early against CGA in that game where they lost as well. I'm like, man, these guys are really good. But sometimes they just don't draft themselves win conditions. And this is kind of what we were saying against DFM. I think the difference between V3 and DFM is that V3 are just playing better individually as a team than when DFM were in the same kind of situation. But what this gives me a lot of hope for is that V3, if they do get a good draft, they are looking very, very strong.
Yeah.
The Sengoku game, though, they were just manhandled. Like,
My-
it didn't
yeah.
help that Paz was really outplayed versus
Yeah,
Alphaman, but
so I mean,
at
like-
least they brought it back versus Burning Core.
The problem was that the game snowballed against them with the Sengoku and against them where their win conditions need to be. Because what they wanted to do was have Kha'Zix play around Camille with LeBlanc roaming up, and you basically just like get the Camille split push ahead with the Ashe and Tahm Kench holding mid. Because that's what that pick does. You hold mid, you can't get through. You just wave clear and keep the Ashe. And you play to your side lane. They, after that kind of dive top lane went really wrong in a lot of ways. 1-for-1 with Paz in an awful position after the teleport bot also went wrong. Their win conditions are done and they had to try and wait till Camille hit 3 items. Never got the chance.
It didn't happen. Didn't happen.
So part of it was failing to play to the win conditions. Part of it was I also wonder whether V3 might run into issues if they don't get to have high priority bot lanes.
I agree with that one. I think that V3 are not great playing from behind unless they have Thresh.
And even then, like, we saw, I know when we went back to VOD review their other loss,
Right, against
with
CGA.
where it was Callista Thresh, but it was against a lane which they kind of lost because of range discrepancies.
Was that Jin Set? Jin Set,
Something
that was
like, yeah. And it was just sort of like, okay, so...
That being said, I think that with Caitlyn in meta, Caitlyn Morg, that's like a playmaker for Reiner if we come into later patches. Caitlyn,
Yes.
very high priority. Potentially that's really good for V3.
Yeah, but the thing is actually, Archer has loved Callista. He's been, he was loving it over spring. He's been loving it over summer. Aphelios and Callista, he's played 4 times each. He's added 4 games for Ashe on top. Those 2 champions, particularly Aphelios and Callista, kind of falling off pretty hard. I mean, you can get away with Callista into certain drafts, but there are a lot of things that outrange her and beat her early in lane, which means Callista's just less valuable.
I know that there is a prevailing opinion amongst certain people that says that if Callista isn't the strongest champion in lane in meta, you can't pick her. Because it's very hard to justify that pick otherwise. She can't lane versus Ashe, that's another one too, because if a volley hits you, the slow dropping your attack speed means you just don't get to trade ever.
I want to I agree with you on this. I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit into a different direction to just kind of see where you guys think of this. Moving forward, is V3 going to potentially have a coach difference problem? As we're seeing some of the teams really level up. I mean, there's Karen on Sengoku. We've got On Air now for DFM. Crest Gaming Act haven't currently got anybody of super...
That says a lot.
Super, but then that kind of explains things, right? I mean, Grendel has now moved into the position of their house manager, so that's where that's gone.
They do have one coach, I think.
Yeah, but how important is he in comparison to some of the other coaches?
They've got Cure.
Q.
I don't know. The Japanese O's.
He's been with Crest since 2017, and he was on DFM.
Give me
they've got a few former coaches and stuff, but that's past. V3 have had a long-time coach on their side, and I'm just wondering, now that we're seeing also the Hawks buy into coaching stuff, they've got 3 coaches now, the Hawks. And Sengoku have a mental coach and everything else. Like these are teams that are investing into it. I just get a little bit worried. Are we starting to see small cracks where, you know what, this is an easy problem to patch up by just bringing in people that, one, work with the team. The Hawks are already seeing night and day difference, and I'm just wondering, is this something that is non-tangible that should maybe be looked at?
There's a good point to be made there. I think I agree with you. I think you've hit on something really big there. I think that CGA rely on some... I know you say that they're a very face-up drafting team. I think that they basically rely on Arya at 5th pick, looking at the whole draft, saying, I want to play this.
Yeah. Or occasionally, like, relying on the mechanical... Or, like, the mechanical prowess of Gango to say, okay, and now we can flex Cassiopeia bottom, Callista mid.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you flex, is basically by pulling out...
And that just
kind of
shells in the background.
On the other side of it,
I can just see Nap in a rocking chair, just with a pipe, just going, just give me whatever, and I will win lane, lads. Don't worry. I'll figure it out. Old man Nap is here, because he's been in the LJL for so long, so I'm just kind of like, just give him anything, he'll figure it out.
Or sort of like Arya there on this big back chair with the little cat. You'll come to me at 5th pick on red side and ask me to find a
save a draft.
Yeah, literally. And then you've got poor
and
Unicorn
you ask me
just
to
comes
play
in.
Callista mid. Like,
that's the thing, man. The thing is that, like, I agree it's not great for CGA, but having a guy that can always save a draft on 5th pick red side is huge.
It's great.
And an AD carry that will play Callista or play Cassiopeia or something.
So I think it is an issue. I don't think it's one which doesn't have any solutions to it. It's just a flimsy solution.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas with someone like...
I want to get
someone like Sengoku,
soundbite. Let me get a soundbite. If V3 and CGA don't win or come even in or don't look strong in playoffs in spring split, this is why. No good coaching staff.
Yep.
I'm getting the soundbite here because that could be something come spring where they're like 4th, 5th pick team. I'm just like, called it. And if it works out, fuck it. I'm wrong. I'm okay with being wrong.
I'll also put it out there that this is, actually the V3's losses have been... One was kind of the weird draft thing they went for. The second one as well is actually makes sense if you're wanting to play around your sidelines. LeBlanc in one, Camille in another, 1-3-1 with Ash and Tom Kent.
No, that's why it's a bigger loss for me. That's why it's a bigger loss for me. Because actually, I don't think they were the better team.
Yeah, and that's my point is actually coaching staff comes in big time when you are trying to learn a new style.
100%.
Yep. Well, because there's actually certain things that your team can do naturally, because how your team plays, and there's like the natural rhythms. Trying to do something that is new, and you've got to pick things up, unless you are just a very... One of those teams which just ends up, where it just comes together in the right kind of brilliant madness. Yeah. Mad Lions. G2 last year. Where there is a certain amount of actually, sometimes the coach is there just to facilitate the brilliance of the players and like
JDG.
Facilitate conversation.
Yeah, JDG. I think the Rocks Tigers back in 2015-16.
Sports, yeah. And like yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say Rocks potentially actually did have they had Zephyr, who's a brilliant coach. So I'll add a little bit of something in there as well.
I just know that a lot of their wacky picks were player oriented, not.
That's okay. That's why in that case I take it back.
So I know that Gorilla came up with MF support.
That kind of thing.
And I remember actually seeing that on a G-Bay documentary. I think he referenced that. So
yeah, it was a huge pick. It was such a huge thing, and also stuff like Lux support. He played Lux support as a counter too to stuff like way back out of meta as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So like there
Great
is
team,
something,
great
yeah,
team.
or
Yeah, there's always
similar
something.
sort of to similar sort of to like G2 in their prime. It's like, okay, we're gonna run Zoe Bard bot and just outplay you come level 6. Like what? Like who preps against that? Like that kind
No
of
one.
thing.
FPX
like-
apparently.
Right?
Well, except they didn't do
it?
that in the finals. Might have been the
Yeah.
problem. There we go. We figured it out. Why you can't win a
Yeah,
fucking
okay.
world
Well,
championship?
But like my question here is that like for V3, that's clearly not quite the case where they don't have that same level of innate. Like they have some things they do incredibly well.
Yep.
When they tried to broaden that out to a very different style, namely mid 2v2, like bot lane holds mid, jungler plays around the side lanes looking to 1-3-1. Didn't look very clear.
Yeah,
Agree.
as much as I like Ace's LeBlanc in isolation, I don't think the team played well around it in these 2 games this week.
No.
Yeah, I'm like you were saying, like in that CJ loss, kind of V3 with a better team. This game, I feel like Sengoku beat them
Fair and
with
square.
a lot of different comfort picks for V3, because obviously Boogie's been playing well in the Kha'Zix, and like you said, the draft kind of makes sense. Ashe Tahm pretty safe in the bot lane. And now that raises a lot of questions going on towards like the best of 5 we'll see between these 2 teams, because I'm like, we know Sengoku can pivot into drafts and counters and try and with the coach diff, as you've been saying, right, potentially get themselves a winning draft. But if they are playing relatively even and showing that they, as long as they have, even if they have an even draft, they can outplay, suddenly this is a really, really interesting best of 5 to look forward to. Like, I wouldn't be able to call it right now if you asked me.
I mean,
I wouldn't either.
I'll put this out though, that I will also say, actually, as for much for saying, oh, V3, not sure what's happening there versus Sengoku Gaming, I want to give some serious credit to Sengoku Gaming as well.
Oh,
particularly
they
for their
deserve
first,
it.
That's the big thing.
Their
That's the big
first
thing.
5,
It's why
10
it's the
minutes.
wobble. Sengoku played really well.
Because actually, their first 5-10 minutes were brilliant. The way they responded to the top lane dive, blanks, invade onto the Kha'Zix to make sure the Kha'Zix couldn't get the right items early
Pyrian's
enough. All of those things.
rotation's so
Pyrian's
important.
rotations on this day, like all of those things where you go, actually, for all that we had some issues with how V3 played, particularly the mid game, the answers that Sengoku had to the early plans from V3 were also really strong. So credit where it's due. Some of it's actually also V3 having their plans really scuppered early, and we've seen that haunt V3 in the past.
And
actually,
realise
is their adaptability for the first 5-10 minutes can be a bit shaky.
Yeah, and realise this is also us nitpicking V3 at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Because this is
Kinda
where
have to,
we
though.
have to, because we need to nitpick them, because if they're our 12-2 team, we would like them, if they keep playing at their best, to represent us to some point, unless CGA get there and you're Nymaera.
Variance, baby.
Ride or die! Ride or die!
Group
yeah,
stage or death.
Like, why have you got a rosary on, Alex? Why is that little picture of Ida, like Arya and this locket on your...
Ride or
Wait
die!
on! Why is this like mask of Arya's face placed on your Arya
Alex,
statue?
why are
What's
you
going
dropping
on?
blood into a goblet?
Domenu, deranu, domenu. Anyway, gentlemen, that will round us out of
That's the
our
deepest lever all day.
Week 7 recap. I will quickly recap for our listeners. In 6th place, we have Burning Core. In tied 4th place, which is our next topic, Detonation Focus Me and the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. 3rd place is Crest Gaming Act, who will have top seed out going into round 3. Important to note. Which means they might just get straight to round 3. And then we have our 1st and 2nd place teams who will be in our gauntlet match. And that will be Sengoku Gaming in 2nd place. And V3 with side selection, which will be important for that first game. Gentlemen, in only a few hours, me and Initia1ise will be covering Detonation Focus Me facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. I'm going to just keep referring to them the Hawks moving forward. This is going to be a best of 1. This will decide who gets side selection versus either the loser or, well, whoever Chris Gaming don't want to play. This is a lot to play for, because they could genuinely play a repeat of this best of 1 in a best of 5 scenario, but the winner of this best of 1 has side selection.
Well, bluntly, the winner avoids CGA in the first round. Like,
Also huge.
Yeah, like that's the thing is actually then because CGA choose between the 5th and 6th place, which I kind of forgot to mention on broadcast. I feel really bad about that. But that also means you avoid CGA in the first round, and maybe CGA fall out because they're variants. You don't really like facing CGA in a best of 5 because they're just so bloody bizarre, and you have no idea what's going to turn out.
No, it's 50-50. Are they going to win or lose? I mean, in a best of 5. They could go
like-
0-3, they could 3-0, they could also go 2-2, and then it's a coin flip at the end.
Yeah,
Who
that's
knows?
a big one. It's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, so, That is a huge thing. This is also why I'm saying, like, either of these teams, even if they win the first round, have to go against CGA with side selection if they win their round and stuff like that. Like, that is important, but still, having side selection in a best of 5 versus the team... Honestly, I think the round 1 teams, the 4 we've got grouped between 3rd and 6th, are relatively closely matched. I think we could definitely see 5-game series. We could definitely see that.
Maybe. Maybe.
So this tiebreaker could change the entire flavor of playoffs. Could do.
So, as we're on the podcast, I'll be doing this live as I normally do. But let's just rip off this band-aid now, gentlemen. It's a best of 1, so we might be seeing some spicy tech here from both teams. Syros might play LeBlanc for the first time. We just don't know! Play fucking LeBlanc or Zoe, Syros! Please, fix your draft, DFM, please! God damn it! I'm just memeing now at this point because it doesn't matter anyway. Who's winning? Initialize.
So, right. Okay, I'm gonna put this straight out. If it's week 7 DFM, they crush it. If it's super weak DFM, they crush it in reverse and lose.
I think that one big factor is that the Hawks have a quicker average game time, so we'll have side selection as far as I am aware.
I believed DFM had that because of what the wiki was telling me, but the wiki has been wrong in that in the past. So you might.
It might be. I think it's a quicker average game time against each other, possibly.
Maybe I thought it was average. Oh, it might be average win time. Anyway, so okay, if DFM,
I thought the Hawks had basically the fastest games full stop this season. They were doing stupid.
Yeah, well they lost. They win fast, they lose fastest. Yeah,
which works for them perfectly because if they get into a tiebreaker, maybe they're always planning for it, right? They're just like, we just guys, let's just get to it, and if we win fast, great. If we lose fast, great. We'll win tiebreakers, great. I can't find that.
You know what I was saying last podcast episode about how DFM work well with known quantities, and the Hawks are potentially not that because of their huge changes due to coaching staff. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Hawks. Okay. Actually, it's a risky one. I think that I'm gonna stick by what I said in that last podcast episode, and it is dangerous because DFM looked really good this week, and Hawks looked good, but they were less exciting.
Well, I mean, the statement that I put. DFM are a return to form, but I'm still hesitant to say it's a true return to form because
this split's not been good, man.
It's really not been, and I'm interested in your point of view, Initialize, where we're currently sitting with DFM coming into this match.
So, if I take the last week of play as what we're gonna get, and I'm hoping that's true, then I think I favour DFM.
Okay.
But that said, Hawks have been looking better. We have seen DFM falter before, especially this split. So, me saying they'll win, it's whereas before it would have been 90% chance DFM wins.
Yeah. If
this time I favour them, but it's not as sold as it would have been. Part of the reason for is I think the fact that Ebby and Steele looked so much better, in that gives me a lot of faith versus Aramik, who is still an issue in weak side. Because actually, it was only a week ago that that guy was getting dived under his tier 2 and dying in awful fashion on Karma of all champs.
Sure.
So I give it to DFM, but that's not to say I could still see Hawk.
I believe DFM will have side selection because in the game they won in the head-to-head, they won in 26 minutes, whereas when the Hawks won on the repeat round, so first round, Detonation Focused Me destroyed them in 26 minutes. Second time round, 34 minutes. Oh wait, no, that's Sengoku. I got the wrong one. It begins with S. Continue, keep filling for me, please.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm pretty sure that DFM do have side choice, given what the official Twitter's been putting out too. Just that they've been putting it in order. Normally, the team on the left-hand side has that.
Sure.
Yeah, and that I think that. In this matchup, it matters less. I think it's mainly just a CJ thing where I'm like, oh yeah, blue side's really bad for CJ right now, just because of the way they draft.
Sure.
Hawks won in 35.
Okay.
Yeah, I think...
So still almost a 9-minute disparity, so that makes sense why DFM will have side selection.
My problem is, again, one of my problems now is that if DFM are going to play... Well, it's an interesting thing, because... If you go blue side, you can't draft Camille but Galio, which is huge for stomping top and a huge combo in general around the Asian regions right now, because I know PCS, VCS are just loving that. If maybe you take red side and try and snap it up in one and give up something like a set first pick,
But no,
Also,
but then
also
that's
avoids
the
Dasher
thing.
getting counterpick.
The Hawks don't play much of set. They've only played set once, and that was for poo.
Yeah, maybe you just ban out maybe you ban out Galio then as the Hawks and just like, unless you want to bait it in and you've got something prepared for it. Maybe that's something that the coaches do. I think if DFM are crushing on it, maybe. Yeah, I think that I think the Hawks are enough of an unknown quantity to really rattle DFM.
I'm sorry, Initia1ise. I'm gonna actually have to agree with Nymaera. I think
it's close. I think it's like 60-40.
Oh, it's not. It's closer than that for me. It's 45, 55. Yeah, I'm very slightly leaning, and it's honestly coach. The new coach is coming in.
Make a
I know
massive
we're against on air,
DFM.
so
it's uncharted waters.
But
really difficult for
I
DFM.
really just think the coaches, from what we saw of week 7 and Super Week, I'm kind of like, maybe the Hawks just have a minor expectation, like you've said, in Nymaera, and partly Initia1ise with that unknown quantity.
Yeah.
Unknown to, like, the Hawks are now starting to bring out random drafts. They're doing things a bit more. They're doing things smarter.
They're varied.
Which
You
is
know, it's like we were
what
talking
they
about how
should be.
Sengoku and maybe the Hawks and DFM are the most varied teams at drafting. The Hawks have only started doing that recently, and that's really dangerous because
Well, it
who
used
knows
to
how
always
far
be
it
Rascal
stretches.
Jester. R.I.P.
Yeah. I'm basically going off recent form, and I'm sort
That's
of giving it to DFM. But that said, I understand that the variance could be problematic. Then again, beginning of spring split, no one knew anything, and DFM were crushing then. So like it's.
But they were also
it's
just
not
better
always
than
true.
everybody else at that point.
Also true.
And they were also a known quantity, and they had played 2 splits, I think, with this full roster. Actually, no, they had done 4 splits. They had done 2 years with this full roster, from my understanding.
Yeah,
Gang
yeah.
was their newest player.
It's more through other rosters
Steel
being
was their
unknown
newest
quantities.
player.
But yeah.
Yeah, Still was their newest player, and that was 2 years ago. So, like, they've got that thing, and that definitely will also be an important part, because obviously only 3 members of the Hawks have played with each other a lot. Honey and Pooh, they're still on their rookie year in Professional League of Legends, so they're not rookie split, but rookie year still. Definitely could come into it. 1 for DFM, 2 for the Hawks, but we're very tentative on our...
It's close.
Yeah.
It's close.
We're
Again,
very...
as much as we think it's difficult for DFM to deal with an unknown quantity, well, at least that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's obviously really hard for us to predict because that unknown quantity is unknown.
Yes.
That's the nature of it.
Cool. Well, with that said, gentlemen, it's time to move on to the last part of our podcast. Well, second to last part of our podcast.
Yeah.
And this is where we do our Players of the Week, gentlemen, for our Week 7. Now, obviously, moving forward, we do still do Players of the Week, but it's more Players of the Round normally instead of Players of the Week, as obviously we will be talking about less players. And to a point, we eventually stopped doing this because there's no point in doing it when you've only got 2 teams playing off against each other. It's just like one team's better, one team's worse.
I think we'll probably just give a player of the series or whatever. It's probably just the easier way. Well,
Probably.
I don't know. We'll talk about it.
I can't remember how we did it last playoffs.
You know,
How do
I think it was player of the series. Because remember we gave Art in the losing series versus CGA.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's player of the series.
So as we will go from top all the way down. I begin us out with our top player of the week. And for any of our listeners, if you're getting confused why we're arguing, this is partly also our opinion. So we can also just kind of say something controversial because we just think it's like this. And whether we're right or wrong doesn't
It allows
actually
us to
matter.
cover more ground because there are only 3 of us.
Exactly. So in the top lane, my top laner of the week is Apperman. Initia1ise, you, sir?
I went with Abby.
Okay. Nymaera?
I went with Ebby with honourable mentions to Afferman. Splitting the difference, but tiebreaker over to
I was in
Ebby.
the same space.
Well, as I am the minority, I will have to defend Apperman, and Apperman beat CGA in V3. He looked good. He was basically putting people in their place. He didn't have to crutch on other members of his team a lot of the time. He commonly was winning lane, especially, I think, importantly against the Paz one, where he definitely could have fallen very far behind, found a way in, dived Paz, got the kill, won the lane, and was landing very important death rounds against CGA, getting rid of Nap and Aria in 2 very important fights, which basically set up Yutori Moashi and Pyrion to do very dirty stuff with Blank assisting and Enti. He just played flawlessly, and this was the top 2 teams. I couldn't put him anywhere else. He was just the only person for me.
And that's why he's obviously on our radar as well.
Yeah.
I think Ebby really crushed both of his games in a similar way. Again, against Rascal Jester, caveat is it's Rascal Jester. But he still pulled the trigger on Camille every time he sent the top lane a 0-9.
Is
Like,
it-
that's
like,
still, even
Cold's
against
a
a
good
bot
top
tier
laner.
team, even against a bot tier team, like, that's still pretty
Yeah.
disgusting. And I know they ran it into him, but still, it's pretty disgusting.
It helps,
And also,
but, yeah.
he team fought really well. There was a time where he was shutting down Art and Caitlyn very early into the game before Camille's even that strong. And then in the other game against CJ, he really punished Arya, like, a lot. And it is hard to punish that guy. He's a very good player. And Ebby did it on
obviously-
cooldown.
And obviously the volley bear into Azir is kind of nice because the wall means jackal to that ultimate of volley bear. But even so, out team fighting CGA is very good news. He was beating Nap in lane, you know. And like,
Again,
there is a caveat to Rascal Jester, but that caveat isn't 7-1 and 10 as your scoreline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty damn absurd. That said, Apperman had a
was close
very
to
good
it.
week
It was
as well.
close.
Like, his Mordekaiser game was very impactful. We said about the turnaround versus the Camille when it was looking a bit shaky versus V3. Good news for him too. So, you know, absolutely, Apperman was up there. I was like, do I want to give it to Apperman? Kind of do. But
My
then again,
problem was for
just
Ebby.
crushed
I
it.
thought he played superb against CJ. It's just it was Rascal Jester, and I
know.
Yeah,
I
but
know.
like,
That was
also
my
Coldcock's actually been pretty good.
Yeah,
largely.
but it's
That's
still
what I
also
was-
Rascal
Hale
Jester.
was
That's
really
why I
good.
couldn't
Played
do
bad
it.
that game,
Yeah,
Sam.
he
He did play bad that game.
That game was bad. I grant you.
Yeah, and that's why I couldn't give it. But in all fairness, I was like, if it wasn't Rascal Jester, if it was pretty much any other team, he actually would have probably gotten it for me. So
I think I give him some points back for team fighting very well on the Camille. I was quite impressed with him there. Like, shutting down Art, who we have said is a very good player too. So, whatever. Anyway, I think that's top lane
us.
covered pretty thoroughly.
Initialize our resident jungler, sir. Would you do me the pleasure of announcing who your jungler of the week is?
I've gone after changing it twice with Tussle. It was originally going to be
no,
Steel,
shh.
then it went to blank. They're
Okay.
my honourable mentions.
Honorable mentions. Okay. Nymaera.
I went with blank. No changing my mind.
I went with Tussle as well.
Okay.
This means, Nymaera, you are in the minor. So, if you would do me the pleasures of defending your pick somewhat, or just explaining.
So again, it is partly due to Sengoku beating CJV3. Of course, that's always going to be a caveat with anyone who beats the top tier teams. And particularly for a jungler to do that against two very coordinated teams, because they are top teams in the region, I think it's even more impactful on the jungle role in terms of how I view it for those games, because I think sometimes it is more about the individual laning prowess, and that doesn't always translate to a top team. Blank, particularly against Boogie, made his life just so hellish.
He did.
And Boogie, like I've said, I have so much faith in this guy. The guy makes things happen in jungle, which honestly shouldn't happen. And Blank went 8-2-3, controlled the entire game, was really, really good at being that pressure jungler we know him to be. And against CGA, I know he started kind of awkwardly on the Silas, but he had some really good stolen Wukong ults at different points too. And he's just he's one of the best control junglers in the region. Very, very good for a facilitating period too. Although I very much see why Tussle got it. Maybe it's because I didn't cast those games myself that I didn't vote for him. That might actually be a thing. Maybe it's just because I didn't see it firsthand, but still, yeah.
I mean,
Go on, Initialize, you take it.
so I very nearly put blank, but bluntly, his Silas early performance, great CS lead, don't get me wrong, but bluntly, he nearly threw that game away. He went 0-2-0 in the early game and gave CGA 4 kills when when Sengoku Gaming were up 1,000 gold off just laning phase.
Why I
You
couldn't
can't.
do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, yeah, he had a much better later game, and
wanted
the
to.
efficiency on the pick, great news. But you cannot throw 2 team fights in a row that hard and get Player of the Week on jungle. Like that's,
For you.
Yeah, for me, exactly. Tussle, on the other hand, though, Steel, again, great games, but again, there was that one thing versus Rascal Jester. Was like, giving it to Ebby. I'm not sure I can do it to Steel as well, even though, 8-1 and 13 on set is damn good.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the volley bear in against Axis just was everywhere, and more so against Burning Core. Specifically, the fact that Tussle made sure once did nothing early on and got
Agreed.
a lot done himself was really, really big. So,
was.
Shutting down one of our biggest carry junglers in the region in fairly dominating fashion impressed me. And also just early pressure, frankly, compared to Elise Sin. It's good news.
He played the front line that the team needed him to play, and he was always there to cover for Honey, be in front, like miles in front, for curtain calls, for Aphelios ultimates. He was just always in their face for both against Axis and Burning Core, but far more against Burning Core when they tried to try and play back to them. Tussle will just run into the middle of them, volley bear ult, and just go, "I'm here, motherfuckers!" And then they just were like, what do we do? He's got an Oriana ball, And then they just all died, and Honey's just in the background, just going, "Man, this game's free real estate. I love this shit."
I do think the Volibear versus Lee Sin matchup is a fairly tumultuous one, but relatively Volibear favoured. I think that's maybe another reason where I went towards Blank. He played less favourable matchup.
His style is
still, I mean, they're also saying, like, this guy's KDA, the KDA is not just for show. He was really dominant. Actually, like, looking how he was just jumping into people was like, oh, this guy's really going ham.
So in all fairness, I was
well.
really impressed with Blank versus V3, and I was slightly disappointed with him versus CGA.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I get how often I think we've all said at different points, like, yeah, actually 2 consistent games is probably better than 1 great game and the other one.
I
could have been convinced to change my vote, but...
No, and it was also just... Unica is like 5th place, right? Vaguely, wherever, what? I'm not actually interested in going to semantics because
whatever
of actually ranking players and blah 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 and what that means for mental and stuff. But Unica's like mid-tier, whatever. Blank's meant to be top 3, or at least always in that contention, and he just got kind of put away, but then kind of came back and actually was very important for them winning that game. In all fairness,
man,
was super important. His steal,
have a whole episode on
and his stealing of that Wukong ult, night and day, won them one of those team fights. I don't care what you say at me.
Yeah, he did a really good job. I mean, like, I'll also say, like, Steel had 2 stellar games. One where he was teaming with
that's
Ebby.
True. He was
Ebby, and honestly, like the Hex Flash from Raptor Pit to get onto Pink in the mid lane, break up in the mid lane turret, like all of that kind of thing. Like, actually, that's really cool. The second game as well,
really
specifically teaming up with Gang, where he would throw a pillar up for a cosmic binding for the Bard. It was like that kind of thing. Where I go, okay, that's actually really cool. Exactly that kind of thing where I go, actually, that's really cool stuff. So like for me, it was like, okay, I thought about Blank because he had a great game versus Boogie. Yeah, and I said, so like I kind of had to not give it to Steel, if only because I thought, okay, it was made a little easy for him because it was
Personally, I would have probably given it to Blank over Steel.
But like
I was tempted by Steel.
Come on, focus on me, camera. Do this. There you go.
But I think like the 3 picks that we all went for are all totally viable. My honorable mentions was Tussle main, and then I went Steel, then Blank. So
and this is one of the big reasons we do all our separate picks, because as I was saying, with 3 people and sometimes weeks being very split, we get to cover more ground. Like it's nice to be able to actually like talk about the honorable mentions and stuff.
But with that all said, gentlemen, I think we're done with that, and we should now go on to our mid laners. Our resident mid laner, would you like to begin us out?
It's Pyrion, with lots of dashes added in between, because I wanted to make the box look even longer, so maybe you thought I'd pick someone else. But no, it's Pyrion for me.
Fair. Yeah, I'm joining you on that. Pyrion, no contestation, really, outside of 1 player for me. Initialize?
3 for 3, Pyrion.
Honourable mention for anyone? I've got Syros was my honourable mention.
Yeah,
I had that one out.
Yeah,
that was the only person I had really for.
The reason I didn't put Saros is that he was the beneficiary of a Camille while playing his Galio.
Exactly. Agreed. I totally agreed.
And also a beneficiary of a Trundle in his game against an Azir, which is already good, while he's playing a champion that can follow up. I think that he played his role really well. He did. And honestly, I'm just saying, like, hey, guy's laning really well. That's a big thing. He's also got a lot of help from his team, but he's playing really well. Whereas Pyrion was, like, setting up a lot of his own shit. He does all his own stunts for kids.
Yeah, like
he played again 2 polar different champions, lads.
Yeah, he did.
Go on, Initialize.
Like exactly, I think that was it. The Zoe game was pretty mental, actually. It did so much work, did so much damage. But the one that actually really impressed me was the set game, where I thought his set was. But he turned around a number of team fights, managed to escape using some great showstoppers and stuff, and like. Also, it was just a really smart pick into Echo, because Arya had picked this Echo sort of blind. And effectively, it turned into a counter pick for Pyrion in a lot of ways, because Echo is a melee matchup versus a set versus set. The set's really happy. It's like, okay, I have a squishy carry who, he can ult away from me, but he can never threaten me. And I get to face breaker him every time he comes for CS because his time winders down. At least early on. So, good stuff in that. Pyrion played really, really well for me. I'll say that I liked the way Seros played the Heimerdinger particularly. Like, there were a lot of fantastic grenades that turned around things that should never have been turned around. Like, stunned Azir out of a shuffle. Like, there was one where, like, the Tempered Fate got flashed away from, but then he lands a grenade anyway, so Volibear can then jump on him. Like, all those things like, okay, good play there. But it was still Pyrion who just blew me away this week. That Zoe game, that Zet game stuff.
Yep.
Phenomenal performance from me. Nothing really more to say. I was just really impressed with this performance on two completely different champions, really.
That's a big thing too, because again, it kind of it allows us to have that narrative of, hey, Sangoku can really change their stuff in the draft. It's really important.
They really can. Gentlemen, I will lead us out with our bot laners, and it's not even a problem for me. Yutori Muashi, he's back on form, boys! Initialize.
Yeah, come back for the encore, buddy. That Jin was pretty stunning this week. Yutori Muashi for me as well.
And Nymaera.
Make it 3 for 3 once again. Yutori Muashi.
So Yutori Muashi just played so good. Returned to form. And I've said this about people's champions before. His Jin rather, not set. That's Pyrion. His Jin. You need to think about banning it.
I agree.
Because he's now learning how to zone with the ult. And every time he did that against both B3 and CGA, they all just were like, and they all just ran away, and then they just won team fights because the team just didn't know how to respond to a curtain call. And he was getting huge picks.
A really important thing for this is that, remember last split when he was really consistent, but he was playing MF?
Yes.
MF had a lot of things which could eventually shut her down, and we saw, like, in playoffs, like, man, we would have really wanted to see him play something else. Jin is really good in the meta right now, and if it goes through, I think it's going to be really important for Sangoku if Yutori Muashi can be a factor in these games, because remember last split, he was the best AD carry up until the finals.
Yes.
That was what we were saying.
Also,
if you can...
It's punishing the Ashe mains, frankly.
Ashe mains,
being picked into Ashe and looking pretty
Caitlyn, if it comes in. Can punish Kalista too if people want to play that, because it's a lot of point and click heavy damage, very short burst trades, which Kalista normally wins, doesn't win against Jin. So I think that potentially Yutori Muashi, if he steps back up, can be the X factor for Sangoku in the draft and in a lot of these games. So watch out for this guy. Had a really, really good week. Watch out for him in playoffs.
The playoffs, he will have to play against our quote-unquote best bot lane carry in Archer. So we'll definitely keep things interesting in that best of 5 series. Initialize, would you like to run me through who your support is, sir?
I went with Gang, who I thought had a stellar.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention, my AD carry honorable mention was Honey, who had a really phenomenal...
That's really fair.
Same here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so all the same.
Okay, we're all agreed. Okay, very good.
Yeah, really good. He had a really good week.
Nymaera, your support?
Also Gang. Well,
we're starting to agree on stuff, lads. And we're doing this blind. I also went with Gang, for obvious reasons. Initialize is you are the support talker for this one. Please.
So I think it was two quite different styles of game in some way, where the level 1 from Gang versus Rascal Jesters was so good. Especially because it was the Caitlyn lane. The fact that he lands 2 Zenith Blades onto the Caitlyn early on that does a lot of work is fantastic news. Do not get me wrong, Nagi played it poorly. But even so, doing that is really, really good work. And the solar flares later into that game were great.
Mate, it was to a level of how bad Nagi played that we memed about it for the next 3 games afterwards.
It wasn't great.
Yes. That said, the game that really won it for me was the Bard game, where those Tempered Fates, particularly versus the Aphelios and the Azir, just won them team fights versus our best team fighting team in the league. So, I mean, it was helped that, Steel was putting some great pillars down, Heimerdinger was anyway. Like, it was a team performance, but the support, the Bard, coming in, looking strong, great news for Gang being back on.
And I'm going to throw it out there. My honorable mention is NT. I think they played
too.
Really well. However, if I'd put NT, I would have had 4 out of 5 players of the week being Sangoku. I don't know how I'd feel about that. As much as they're really, really good, I do think that Gang was huge in terms of his playmaking, and it's something that look back to last summer playoffs. This guy was our player of the series in the finals. This guy was really good. Really good. This guy, we know the heights this guy can reach. I think that Reiner has by far been the best support this split, but this week means that suddenly it might not be the case for playoffs. And regular season's nice and all, but if he comes back for that, maybe we have a late surge from DFM to make things interesting.
It will will depend on his champion pool moving forward for Reiner. If he keeps playing what he was doing, he could be fine. I mean, in all fairness, I don't think you can fully ban out Reiner. I hope we don't see a return of the Tom Kench though again.
He was really high win rate on that.
Yeah, but that was
I still
with
think it's
Senna lanes.
fabulous I think it's just punishable in the current meta. He hates Ashe because he gets slowed down and run down.
That was
he
his first
hates
game this
Bard.
split.
On the
last
Tom
split,
Kench.
like he had 5 wins last split and no losses. This is his first loss this season.
I
but it was
feel
his
like a
only
lot of those
TOK game
games
this
he
season.
played with the Tom Kench, he was with a Senna. So that did
Did you
True.
ever play with Misfortune at all?
he might have played 1 or 2, but the majority
remember.
was with Senna. And Misfortune, you play a fair bit differently to you play with an Ashe. In all fairness, well, at least in my perspective, you should. Ashe, you're kind of more just to set up and also just get her around the map. Whereas Misfortune, you're there to just be in her face and to just move her away from anyone
Yeah,
trying to do
three out of the 5 games in spring, he was with the Senna.
Okay.
He was building full tank. So he had 2 of them which were support games. But either way, it is still a champion pick, which I remember like his Thresh and his... I think it was like his TK and his Nautilus were like 5-0.
Yeah.
That's in spring. They were really, really impactful. Anyway, it is important to say that like his TK has had historical precedent, but this game was not good.
It was not, and he also, while he did get to play his set again, and it was a return to form, Gang just had such a good week, just such
Consistency.
a good
It's so
week.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That means, who, gentlemen, is our overall MVP? Nymaera, would you like to announce your overall MVP with any honourable
I'm just going to continue the conversation we're having. It's Gang.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm disagreeing that we should continue having this conversation, as I believe it should be all about Pyrion, sir. What about you, Initialize?
Valid choices. You're both wrong. Should be Ebby.
Damn, we were in agreement for so long. So long, lads.
I blame Initialize. I blame Initialize, honestly.
I do that
fair.
all the time. It's actually how I get through life.
Oh, well, I wouldn't go
you
that
just
far.
not big brain enough.
Wow.
Just not big brain enough.
Okay.
It's like, you know how like nothing can ever be so great that it can't be like
Dear.
solved by defenestrating the juniors. It's pretty much the same thing as like just blame the older brother.
Oh,
Sam
okay.
takes this one on the shoulder.
Well, I'm older than both of you, technically, aren't I? Well, right?
Yeah.
And me and
think so,
Me and
yeah,
Sam
yeah, I
share
agree.
birthdays very near each other, so I.
think so.
Sam's 95. What are you?
Oh no, I'm 94. Yeah, I'm the old man here.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, God, I'm wicked. On
Okay,
that
well,
shit.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah,
As you
yeah,
as the
yeah.
youngest.
Let
for it.
the youngest go first.
I think that Gang brought some really much needed playmaking to his role this week, and I think that honestly, it's really a breath of fresh air to have someone on this list which isn't Reiner for me too. I think that
Or
his
Proud.
team, particularly the CGA game, well, Proud's a good one too. That's a good one, but
I'd
I
agree
think that
with you, though.
Gang on 2 very different champions doing 2 very different things held backlines accountable in a meta where it is so important to do so. Yeah, his team could not be in the position they were in without him. That's why he's my MVP.
Fair enough. I'll go next if you don't mind, Initialize.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Pyrion played 2 completely different champions. Wait, that's the same argument that you just used for Gang. He played 2 completely different champions in his role where you normally only play 1 or 2 kind of ways, but he was like, now I'm going to play tank set mid versus Arya and nullify him in a completely different way, and he's also not going to get to counterpick the way he thinks he's going to get to counterpick, because he thinks he's going against the Silas. Surprise! You're not. Lost lane. Win game for Sengoku. Then he also gets to play Zoe. And if it wasn't for him rotating in the first 5 minutes of this fucking game, I don't know if Sengoku win. I'm genuinely not sure. That game becomes very different after. He trades the 1-for-1, makes it very difficult. Ace, bless his heart, he didn't rotate around to maybe try and pick up something else. So that's a problem. And a thing that I hope management and coaches looked at and were like, you should have rotated. We might have been able to get a 2-for-1 here. Game might go in our favour. In all fairness, Pyrion did it, rotated, kept them in this game, and then basically hard won his lane. And yeah, he played flawlessly. I'm really happy with Pyrion, and I like this if this is where we're going into playoffs, because this means very exciting things.
No.
Initialize.
Similar argument in some ways to you guys. You had
Weird.
2 very different playstyles in terms of you had one game where you were the win condition focused and also kind of like a split pushing hard carry champion versus what was effectively a bruiser front game. He played exceptionally well in both. It's also he won lane really heavily in both. And like it was just also a real return to form in terms of playing to the win conditions in a really, really smart way. The Camille was permanently set up really well with the Galio and stuff, but like that was playing for the win conditions really well, finding his way onto the Camille as well when he were getting to the team fights. News, especially, or not sort of finding a way onto the Caitlyn, rather, was the right phrase I was looking for. Especially when it was like Art was looking to do some big DPS in around a dragon fight, like he managed to fly over a wall and get onto the Caitlyn, get her in the
Cancel the Night Calvin there.
Yeah, that kind of thing where I go, okay, more than just actually playing the lane well, you're playing the win conditions later on well. Same with the volley bear. It's like, okay, my job here is to make sure Arya gets to do Jackal. I will jump over the Emperor's Divide every time, take him out of a team fight, find a teleport flank, run the Aphelios down. It's like, okay, good laning phase, 2 different styles of champion, plays to the late game win condition.
So pretty much the same argument for 3 different players. And honestly, I can't fault you guys for your picks either. I kind of roll the dice on it a little bit, and it's like, yeah, Gang really punished some. Yeah, no.
Gang played
all 3 of these
good.
picks.
Abby played really good. Tyrion played really good.
Played really good.
I think we all picked really good players for once, and normally
this is probably the closest for an overall MVP of a week that we've probably had
in a while. Yeah,
in a long time, in recent memory.
Yeah, it's normally not been this varied. It's normally been one player, and then we're like, yeah, like I mean, what, a few weeks ago before Super Week, we were like, yeah, it's just Reiner and
Reiner or Boogie.
That's it. Figure it out. We'll flip coins and we'll figure it out.
I mean, mid-split MVP definitely belongs to one of those 2. But like, if playoffs goes super wacky. Who the fuck knows?
I mean, like, I'll add in that obviously there's a certain amount of, like, personal bias there because, like, it was, like, so satisfying to see him come back to form. So, like, there was a certain amount of that for me as well. I was like, oh, thank God he's back to actually being good. Like, that was in there too, don't get me wrong. But, you know.
And you're allowed to do that, obviously.
Yeah. So, but even so, I think it was a good performance out of a number of players this week who all deserve an MVP shout-out.
And no V3 members for, I believe, the first time of us doing our Players of the Week, which is...
Well, very true. Very true.
I believe it actually is, because V3, even though I think when they went 1-1 a few weeks ago versus CGA, I think we still nominated a member of V3, so that's a lot to go. Gentlemen, though, it's question time. And we have been given a question and a statement, which isn't really a question, but I'll still cover it anyway. I feel like we might as well. But chips are tasty. Hello, welcome back to the question section. Chips are tasty. They are
chips
indeed.
Are tasty.
They really are. I still want to know what type of chips they're talking about.
Yeah, we're British here, so it's going to be actual chips.
Or poker chips. That's the problem.
Don't eat those, especially with all the germs that are on them. Really don't put those in your mouth. The poker chips would no.
Oh no.
Yeah, the amount of times they've been touched. Yeah.
He asked, or they asked the question, bets on how quickly DFM will speedrun every team in playoffs. I'll give you 20, no, I'll give you 1 to 20. Not good odds. Not good odds.
Yeah, this is my problem. You know what I was saying about, so if they win round 1, because, well, either way, okay, if they face
they need
CGA,
to do tiebreaker.
Yeah, they need to do tiebreaker, that's one thing. And like, okay, what are the odds they beat the other teams in their bracket? So you think, so that's CGA, the Hawks, and Burning Core. You know we were saying that in the podcast or 2 ago, right? And it was, okay, so the tiebreaker will be very telling, but even then, a best of 5 is very different to a best of 1, and still an unknown quantity for the Hawks. If they face them, kind of awkward. Yeah. Burning Core, yeah, they probably beat them in current form, don't get me wrong. But then CGA, when CGA have side selection for 3 out of the 5 games, that's not going to be a speed run, that's going to be 5 games. That's going to be 5 games. It's going to be all over the place, there's going to be coin flips everywhere. It's not going to be speed run. There's a good chance they go out in round 2 if they don't face CGA in round 1.
And there's also a chance, in my eyes, they could just lose to the Hawks or Burning Core, depending on how things go.
The Hawks
both Hawks and Burning Core have players on their team who we've outright said are, I believe, are close to overall MVP or have definitely been in their role for MVP of a week. Ray Farkey once, proud, have each well-deserved earned spots there. Yeah. They have 2 other members on their team. We're not going to talk about them at the moment. We're trying to big up these teams at the moment. The Hawks have the same thing with how they've been performing recently, and CGA will be a best of 5 in my eyes. But we haven't heard from the DFM fan himself. Go on. So
I agree with you guys, generally speaking. For chips are taste, so if I take this and say, okay, so if DFM were to do it, so like I would say, like if, and there is a world where basically week 7 is the form we're going to get DFM in. And they are consistently there. They've sorted what they want to do. where like everything is golden. They crush the tiebreaker tomorrow, and like if that's the form we get in playoffs, then yeah, there is a world where they just 28-minute game everybody by being super consistent, winning every lane. That said, I tend to agree that it is hard to come in and say that's what's going to happen because of what we've seen before. Then again,
Also,
this is a team who's done it before. There's a lot of experience, there's a lot of talent, a lot of great teaching form. If week 7 is the form we're getting in as well, they're on decent form. Like, there is a world where all that comes in and they just get to speedrun everybody because they've just hit back where they need.
Just remember, last playoffs, they didn't have a single 3-0 series. They went 3-2, 3-1, 3-1. Now I have to say, DFM, they were further ahead of their competition in the 2-3-1s they had against V3 and then Sengoku than they are against these current teams right now. I think that they are close.
They can't give a loss up. They can't give a loss up. They could when they were on the upper bracket. They're not there. And that's another important thing. We saw DFM, when they came into playoffs last round, they lost to Sengoku in a best of 5. And then...
Had to recover.
Then patch recover, huge change, and something we're going to talk about in our next podcast because we have questions. But DFM came back on the new patch and just looked reinvigorated and destructive. They didn't start out playoffs like that, even though they were the favourites going in, and they had side selection as well. So I'm a little bit hesitant on them.
So I'll throw this in. If we see tomorrow, in a few hours, if we see that, relative to this podcast recording, by the way, guys, this comes out post the results. But if we see DFM come in tomorrow, crush the Hawks, it's like, okay, we've had 3 games, like it's not a flash in the pan, they're on form. You can start to give credence to the fans and stuff and say, okay, maybe we do see the Cloud9 gauntlet run, the SKT gauntlet run, the G2 gauntlet runs.
Oh, we could.
Where these guys come into playoffs and just do what these teams do.
Yeah, but Sam,
remember there is a word with that.
Remember the C9 gauntlet run was.
The whole way. That was until it was 3. It was a 3-1 final.
That's content.
Oh, come on, yeah.
But yes, you're absolutely again. I'm putting that out as kind of like the famous one rather than one that was. Sure. But you could potentially start saying, okay, at that point there is enough of a sample size where you go, actually, these guys are contenders, and we know what DFM as contenders can do. I can have some faith if we see that tomorrow. Do I expect it to be likely as an analyst rather than as a fan? Not entirely. That said, I don't want to write DFM off because of the history, because of the talent, because of what we've seen in the last.
Yeah, and also like if there's a precedent to be set by game like week 7, and they are kind of cleaning up their acts because we've now seen some evidence that they can do that.
I put the reverse. I can play devil's advocate for this exact argument, which I hoped for actually. Great, they beat a coin flip team and the worst team in the LJL. What the fuck does that mean to me, really?
I agree.
We're actually going to see them play against the... I think this tiebreaker match is a big game, like, big changer for me.
This is the actual benchmark.
This is them actually getting a benchmark, because beating a coin flip team, the team where we think they could lose to a bottom league amateur NA team, and also then beat top esports in back-to-back game. Like, genuinely, they could beat JDG. They could also then lose to me and Nymaera on challenge. Well, maybe not me, but Nymaera and maybe others.
Remember end of last split when CGA won like a 5-6 game loss streak and then crushed the tiebreaker match to end out the split. And then went on to like 5-game series their way to round 3, because they could, That's the team we're dealing with.
Definitely that room. And like,
it's the same team. Nothing has changed about them.
I'll say with the Hawks, I'm still not entirely sure where to put them on the power
But
rankings.
isn't that great for them coming into this?
But what I'll say is I don't think they're all necessarily that high variance. And the question is, if they're not that high variance, what is the bar you set? Is it kind of like mid? Is it higher mid? Is it lower mid? And I just don't know as yet. I still really worry about Aramik though. And I also think that Honey and Pooh are in a similar position to say Archer and Ryanair, Gango and Grendel, where like actually these guys, if they get put behind, go behind with a big underline. So against,
I would say that actually the Hawks bot's been pretty good recently.
When they've lost, I mean, they've not even that recently, bloody. When they lost in Super Week, that it was the bot lane getting slapped.
I do think they are kind of CGA light. I think that part of that comes with less variance because they're not as weird.
Balls to the wall.
Yeah, I do think they got a better jungler. I think that tussle
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's a
Very
really big
good.
thing, because remember that Steel was propping up, well, really punishing, not even propping up Saros, he was just, because what that would assume that Saros was playing bad, he wasn't. He was punishing Arya. I think that when you've got a more even jungle matchup, you don't get to have that full 3 winning lanes, like we saw in that game. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's going to be really close.
Well, you now know our opinions, and while you listen to this podcast, you can be sitting back in your chair already knowing the results on what kind of DFM we'll be seeing going into playoffs, and also what type of Hawks we might be seeing going into playoffs, as well as you'll also now know where they're actually seeding and who they're playing against, as we will find that out after the tiebreaker match. I believe that's how that goes. The teams are told. Well, CGA has to say who they want to play, and then DFM just get de facto told.
Yeah,
I think they have to choose on that day.
Oh, the winner. Yeah.
Yes. So, like, I'll say this for Chips Are Tasty specifically. Bets on how quickly DFM speedrun it. I'll say 1 in 5, 20%.
Ah, see, I'm not even giving them that. I'm giving them like a 1% chance to speedrun everything. That also means they're going to speedrun V3 and Sengoku. I don't think they're doing that.
Absolutely a world where where everything comes together at the right
1
time.
in 5? Can I pay £20 of that action? Because I don't think they're doing that, mate.
1 in 5?
I'll take £20 and then not doing that. I'm getting the reverse odds for that. I'll take the reverse odds for it.
What do you mean by that?
So I pay £20.
So it would pay out 1 quid for every 5 that he puts in.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I'm with you.
So I'll give you £25 for a fiver later when they don't speedrun it, because I'm that confident they don't speedrun.
If you want to take that, I'll take that bet. But
they got a 3-0 every game. They're not doing it.
Oh no! So I'm not saying okay, but I'm not saying like
speedrun.
Okay, 3-0. Do I expect them to 3-0 the whole way there? Probably not. But like
this is the thing right now. If DFM win, it is going to be laborious.
Yeah. I don't know. They're going to have to. I think it'd be 3-1s if they did it.
They have to go
20%
through.
They 3-1.
They have to go through round 1 versus the Hawks or Burning Core or CGA. That is going to be a mess. Then they have to face probably CGA in round 2. That's going to be a mess.
Or a team that upsets CGA, which is fucking huge to say, because if a team can upset them, they could definitely beat DFM. I'm sorry, but
and actually the mental edge you get from it, and also having won a best of 5, even if you're one of these younger teams, that's great. And then you have to face the loser of C3 Sengoku. They will take them to the edge, and then they have to play the winner of those two.
So
I remember, DFM haven't beat DFM or V3 this whole game, this whole split.
So I mean, like I will say, I think the 2 series that if you got in on-form DFM that would be great matches was, I think, the CGA one because of the high variance. I think V3 because it's damn good.
Sure.
I think Sengoku are more solvable.
Oh, I think V3 are more solvable than Sengoku, Sam. I think that Sengoku have got way more styles.
I don't know, but I just remember Super Week. Super Week Sengoku was really
Sam, I remember playoffs last split when Ace was really exposed by
true that.
DFM.
No, that's fair.
I think that could happen again.
I just think it's less of a meta where you can expose the mid laner this current match.
I'd like to round out the end of the podcast here, gentlemen.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't expect to fan more. Back out. Part of this is also just the end of the podcast, and also we probably will be talking about this in more depth come next week's podcast episode.
Very true. Very, very true.
And a statement we got from Everyday. I'd like to have my question answered from last week. We answered it! Fucking degenerate didn't even listen to our podcast. I'm calling you out right now. How does it feel being a less cool VCS English? Again, you're the worst version of us, so I don't know what you're chatting about.
Like again, every day I know what. The problem is I wouldn't know because I'm not. So
I listen to our podcast.
I can't comprehend a world.
Guys, I'm really sorry. You have forgotten one thing here.
What did we forget?
MaskedSwan.
This stuff right on the shelf. I might be letting the team down as far as the coolness, but then how does it feel if I get to keep my shrine to Ari, my waifu, and the shining light in my life? It feels great.
No, we need a token weed, Nymaera. That's why we're better than them.
True. Oh, it's it's the dynamic. By giving the comparison of me being just so shit, and then you guys
makes us look better.
Cool, it actually makes us look better. Wow,
it makes us all look better. I
take it all back.
Because they don't
still feels great, but we're not actually.
This is high level, cool. Cool,
hey, and we gotta stay on brand for our shit. We gotta have a weeb somewhere in us.
There you go. That's it.
And you're not even an anime weeb anymore. You're just a fucking Ari weeb. Fuck that. That's nothing, mate. That's fine.
Sky.
Hang on, wait.
I can be a hype man. I can defend any point. I'm a debater. I should have done debate class, but we didn't have that, sadly, and I think I've killed Initia1ise as well.
Alright, well, maybe that answered Everyday's question in his own way by the scenes we've just witnessed. So, statements or
Absolute
actions?
scenes.
You take your...
I mean, maybe
Take
he'll
your
listen
pick,
to the
man. Take
podcast
your
for
pick.
once. I mean,
Can we end my misery?
we
at some
can,
point?
Initia1ise.
Like-
To recap, everybody, we've seen some ups and downs. We'll be covering we'll be actually covering that tiebreak matchup in a few moments coming into next week's episode, as we won't have any games to cover outside of the tiebreaker matchup, which we will cover, but it won't be super in depth for us to cover because one best of one game. What the fuck can you get out of that outside of minor analysis? And also a coin flip half the time. We'll be covering that live, so next episode we'll be doing more of a chilled out podcast. It'll be just us kind
I
of.
think it'll be a more holistic look. I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Take a bit of a, because you know sometimes with these we have to kind of like be the speedboat, kind of skimming
Yeah.
across the top, lower stuff, and then like we can be a bit of a dive into the deeper
Yeah, and
waters with this
we'll
one.
finally have some of our playoff matches actually decide as well. We'll know who's playing who.
Yeah, that's true.
Good talk about that.
But with that all said, gentlemen, let's round out the end of this podcast. Meaning, if you've gotten this far in this podcast and you'd like to know, all of our social media platforms are either below our faces, or you can find at Nymaera, at Initia1ise with a 1, and at MaskedSwan, as well as also finding at the LJL Unofficial if you're interested in following our content and anything else. We do also stream all of the matches almost live, excluding certain things. Keep tuned to our Twitter and Discord, as we will be releasing updates and announcements regarding how we're going to be covering playoffs once we get that information fully and we can prepare ourselves. Potentially, we might have special guests and other things happening. Ooh. But with that said, for Nymaera and for Initia1ise and myself, MaskedSwan, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back at you very, very soon.
Matinee.